I'm Hazel Mitchell, 32, Chief of Neurosurgery at Boston's most prestigious hospital. Yet 7 years ago, my father looked me in the eye and said, "You'll never amount to anything worthwhile." My mother nodded in agreement. They both believed my younger brother Michael was destined for greatness while I was just taking up space. For years, I carried those words silently as I worked twice as hard to prove them wrong. Before I tell you how my mother nearly collapsed when she found out who I really was, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Give this video a like and subscribe if you've ever been underestimated. Growing up in our middle-class suburban Connecticut home, I learned early that academic achievement was the Mitchell family currency. My parents, Eleanor and Richard Mitchell, weren't subtle about their expectations. Dad was an accountant who'd always dreamed of becoming a doctor but couldn't afford medical school. Mom was a high school English teacher who measured success by the prestige of one's career. "Education is everything," Dad would say at dinner. "It's the difference between being somebody and being nobody." I took those words to heart, bringing home straight A's from elementary school. But somehow, my achievements always seemed to disappear in the shadow of my younger brother Michael's existence. 3 years my junior, Michael was everything I wasn't in my parents' eyes: athletic, charming, socially adept. Where I was quiet and studious, he was outgoing and charismatic. "Look at Michael playing with the neighbor kids," Mom would say. "Why can't you be more social like your brother, Hazel?" When I brought home a perfect math test in 4th grade, Dad glanced at it and said, "That's nice." The same evening, Michael showed a C+ in science that he'd improved from AD, and they took him out for ice cream to celebrate his progress. By middle school, the pattern was firmly established. My straight A's were expected, never celebrated. "This is what you're supposed to do," Mom would say with a dismissive wave. Meanwhile, Michael's B's and occasional A's warranted special dinners and proud phone calls to relatives. The family photo albums told the story just as clearly. There were dozens of photos of Michael's football games, swim meets, and school plays. My academic award ceremonies? Not a single picture. I still remember standing on stage receiving the 8th grade Academic Excellence Award, scanning the audience, and finding no familiar faces. Later, I learned they'd chosen to attend Michael's junior varsity scrimmage instead. It wasn't an important event, Mom explained when I asked why they hadn't come. Besides, Michael needed the support more. The most painful moments were overhearing my parents talking about us to others. To relatives, family, friends, even on phone calls, the narrative was consistent. "Michael's showing real promise," Dad would gush. "Coach says he might get a college scholarship if he keeps developing." Then, almost as an afterthought, "Hazel? Oh, she's fine. Still has her nose in books all the time." The only person who ever truly saw me was my grandmother, Margaret. Mom's mother lived an hour away, and my occasional weekends with her became my sanctuary. "You have a remarkable mind, Hazel," she told me when I was 12, after I explained a science project that had earned me the top grade in class, but only a cursory nod from my parents. Don't ever let anyone make you believe that's not valuable. Grandma Margaret had been a nurse in the 1960s, back when women in medicine were rare and often dismissed. She had stories about doctors ignoring her observations, only to discover later she'd been right. Perhaps that's why she recognized the same dismissal happening to me. When I was 15, Grandma Margaret was diagnosed with a brain tumor. The doctors initially missed it, dismissing her symptoms as elderly confusion until it was too late for effective treatment. I spent every possible moment by her hospital bed during those final months. "Promise me something," she said during one of her more lucid days, holding my hand with surprising strength. "Promise you'll become whatever you want to be, not what anyone else thinks you should be." I promised, and 2 weeks later, she was gone. At her funeral, while my parents consoled each other and fussed over Michael's proper behavior, I made a silent vow. I would become a doctor, specifically a neurosurgeon. I would make sure other people wouldn't lose their loved ones to missed diagnoses and dismissive attitudes. I didn't share this plan with my parents. By then, I'd learned to keep my ambitions to myself. Instead, I channeled my grief into studying even harder, securing perfect SAT scores, and completing advanced placement classes. When I graduated as valedictorian of my high school, I delivered a speech about perseverance and following dreams even when they seem impossible. From the podium, I could see my parents in the audience, Mom checking her watch and Dad scrolling through his phone. They were waiting for the ceremony to end so they could take photos of Michael in his football jersey. He'd been selected for an all-state summer training camp, and that was apparently the real celebration of the day. At the small family gathering afterward, my father raised a toast to Michael and his bright future in college athletics, and to Hazel for finishing high school. That night, I sat alone in my bedroom, acceptance letters from 7 prestigious universities spread before me, including a full scholarship to Johns Hopkins that I hadn't told anyone about. I made my decision then. I would take the scholarship and finally step out of the shadow of my family's low expectations. The day I left for Johns Hopkins was both terrifying and exhilarating. Mom helped me pack with the same efficiency she applied to household chores, while Dad lectured me about being practical with my education. Liberal arts might be more suitable for you, he suggested, despite my clear interest in pre-med courses. Not everyone is cut out for the sciences. What they didn't know was that I'd already mapped out my entire academic path, pre-med with a focus on neuroscience, then medical school, then specialization in neurosurgery. I kept this to myself, nodding along to their limited expectations while privately clutching my scholarship letter like a talisman. The contrast with Michael's college send-off 3 weeks later was stark. For him, they threw a backyard party, invited extended family, and Dad gave a tearful speech about his son following his athletic dreams at State University. For me, there had been a quick hug at the airport and Mom's parting words. Try not to get overwhelmed. My first semester at Johns Hopkins was a revelation. Suddenly, I was surrounded by people who valued intelligence and academic achievement. My professors didn't compare me unfavorably to anyone else. They evaluated me on my own merits. For perhaps the first time in my life, my natural abilities were seen as assets rather than inconvenient personality traits. Ms. Mitchell, your analysis of these neural pathways is quite sophisticated, Professor Diana Winters told me after reviewing my first major assignment. Have you considered research as part of your medical career? I nearly cried at the simple acknowledgement of my abilities. Professor Winters soon became more than just an instructor. She became the mentor I'd never had. A renowned neurologist herself, she recognized my potential and began inviting me to observe her research, introducing me to colleagues, and recommending additional readings. You have a natural gift for this field, she told me one evening as we discussed a complicated case study. The way you integrate information and see connections others miss, it's rare. Meanwhile, I was making real friends for the first time. My roommate Audrey Coleman was studying biochemistry and shared my intense work ethic. We often studied until dawn, challenging each other and celebrating our successes. With her and our small circle of friends, I discovered what it felt like to be valued for exactly who I was. My visits home became increasingly rare and tense. During freshman year Thanksgiving break, I made the mistake of excitedly sharing that I'd received the highest grade in organic chemistry, a notoriously difficult course. That's nice, dear Mom said, barely looking up from preparing the turkey. Did you hear Michael made starting lineup as a freshman? The coach says he hasn't seen that kind of natural talent in years. By Christmas, I'd learned to keep my achievements to myself. I sat through dinner after dinner listening to detailed accounts of Michael's games, his social life, his popularity with teammates. When relatives asked about my studies, Dad would quickly interject. Oh, Hazel's still figuring things out. Not everyone finds their path right away like Michael. The summer after freshman year was my last extended stay at home. I'd arranged a research assistantship with Professor Winters, but it didn't start until July. Those 3 weeks in June became an exercise in invisibility. "Why can't you be more like Michael?" Mom asked one evening after I declined to attend a neighbor's barbecue, preferring to read research papers instead. "He makes an effort to be sociable." "Michael has time for that," I replied, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "I'm preparing for medical school." Dad scoffed. "Medical school? Be realistic, Hazel. Those spots go to exceptional students." I bit my tongue instead of pointing out my perfect GPA. What was the use? In their eyes, I would always be the unremarkable daughter, regardless of evidence to the contrary. That fall, I returned to campus with relief and threw myself even deeper into my studies. I took extra courses, volunteered at the university hospital, and began publishing research papers under Professor Winters' guidance. As my resume grew, my contact with family diminished. The financial reality of my situation became clear when my parents informed me they wouldn't be contributing to any expenses beyond what my scholarship didn't cover. "Michael's athletic scholarship only covers tuition," Mom explained over the phone. "We need to help with his housing and expenses. I'm sure you understand." I understood perfectly. I took on part-time jobs at the campus library and as a teaching assistant, often working 20 hours a week while maintaining my course load. Some nights I survived on vending machine coffee and 2 hours of sleep, but I never let my grades slip. Not once. By senior year, I had been accepted to Johns Hopkins School of Medicine with another substantial scholarship. When I called home with the news, Mom sounded distracted. "That's nice, honey. Did you get the photos I sent of Michael's championship game?" I stopped calling with updates after that. My white coat ceremony at the beginning of medical school should have been one of the proudest moments of my life. It's a significant milestone, the formal induction into the medical profession, where students receive their first white coats and recite the Hippocratic Oath. Families typically attend, beaming with pride. I sent my parents an invitation with details 6 weeks in advance. 2 days before the ceremony, I called to confirm they were coming. "Oh, Hazel, I'm so sorry," Mom said, not sounding particularly sorry at all. "Michael has a big game that weekend. You know how important these scouting opportunities are for his future." I stood in that auditorium, watching my classmates surrounded by proud parents, siblings, and extended family, while I remained alone. Professor Winters attended in their stead, giving me a fierce hug and whispering, "They have no idea what they're missing." That was the final breaking point. I decided then that I would no longer seek my parents' approval or recognition. I would build my life and career without the emotional drain of their indifference. I threw myself into medical school with an intensity that even my hardworking peers noticed. While they occasionally took weekends off or holidays to visit family, I remained in the library, the lab, or volunteered for extra hospital shifts. My singular focus became excellence in medicine, particularly neurosurgery. Around the end of my first year of medical school, I received a strange call from my mother's cousin Evelyn. "Hazel, I was so sorry to hear you dropped out of school. Your mother tells me you're working at a coffee shop now? Such a shame after all that promise." I was stunned into momentary silence. "Aunt Evelyn, I'm in medical school at Johns Hopkins. I haven't dropped out of anything." Her confusion was palpable. "But your mother told everyone at the family reunion last month that you couldn't handle the pressure of university and had to leave." As the conversation continued, a sickening realization dawned. While I'd been distancing myself from family contact, an entirely different narrative about my life had been constructed without my knowledge. Through careful questioning of distant relatives and old family friends over the following weeks, I pieced together the story my parents had been telling everyone. Hazel, the disappointing daughter, had dropped out of college due to emotional problems and was now working menial jobs while Michael continued to be the family success story. The truth about Michael, which I discovered through a mutual childhood friend, was quite different. He had lost his athletic scholarship after a mediocre performance freshman year, coupled with failing grades. He had dropped out after his sophomore year and was bouncing between unsuccessful business ventures, all funded by my parents. I was hurt but not entirely surprised to learn that the money my parents had originally promised for my education had been redirected to bail out Michael's failed attempts at starting a sports marketing company, then a fitness center, then a protein shake business. Most painfully, I discovered through social media posts that Michael had begun implying to his friends that he was pre-med, using vague references to medical studies and even posting photos of textbooks similar to mine. My achievements had become his fiction. I considered confrontation. I drafted multiple emails and letters, even rehearsed phone calls. But ultimately, I decided that engaging would only drain energy I needed for my studies. If they needed to create this fictional version of our lives where he was the successful one and I was the failure, so be it. I would know the truth, and eventually, so would the world. I severed what little remained of our communication. I blocked their numbers, returned mail unopened, and asked the few family members I still trusted not to share information about me. It was like performing emotional surgery, painful but necessary for healing. My medical school years passed in a blur of 16-hour days, complex neuroanatomy, surgical rotations, and research publications. I graduated at the top of my class with multiple residency offers from the most prestigious programs in the country. When I walked across the stage to receive my medical degree, Professor Winters and Audrey cheered loudly enough to make up for my absent family. Dr. Hazel Mitchell, the dean, announced, and in that moment, I felt both the weight and freedom of becoming exactly who I'd promised my grandmother I would be. I chose Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston for my residency, partly for its exceptional neurosurgery program and partly for the distance it provided from my family in Connecticut. The 7-year neurosurgery residency is notoriously grueling, even among medical specialties known for their intensity. The first year as an intern nearly broke me. 100-hour work weeks, being on call every third night, snatching sleep in short bursts on hospital cots, and facing the emotional weight of life and death situations daily pushed me to my limits. Some of my fellow residents quit, unable to withstand the pressure. But I had spent my entire life being underestimated and dismissed. This pressure felt familiar, almost comforting in its clarity. At least here, my performance was judged on measurable criteria: surgical skill, medical knowledge, patient outcomes, rather than how I compared to someone else. Mitchell, explain the approach you'd take for this glioblastoma, Dr. Harrison, the intimidating chief of neurosurgery, demanded during my second year, pointing to an MRI scan during rounds. I detailed the procedure step by step, including potential complications and how I'd address them. When I finished, the room was silent. Dr. Harrison, known for his biting criticism, simply nodded. That's precisely right. Who taught you that approach? It's not in the standard literature. I developed it based on a combination of techniques from recent journal articles, I answered truthfully. He raised an eyebrow. Interesting. I want to see you perform it. That case became the first of many where I began innovating surgical techniques. By my 4th year of residency, I had developed a method for accessing certain previously inoperable brain tumors that significantly reduced patient risk. When my research was published in the Journal of Neurosurgery, I received recognition from the wider medical community. Meanwhile, through the grapevine of distant relatives and old acquaintances, I occasionally heard updates about my family. The fictional narrative about me had evolved. Now I had apparently tried medical school but couldn't handle it and was working as a pharmacy technician somewhere in the Midwest. Michael, conversely, was supposedly thriving in medical studies. The most surreal moment came when a new resident joined our program from my hometown area. During an orientation dinner, he mentioned knowing my brother. Michael Mitchell, right? He's always talking about med school and his research. Says his sister couldn't hack it and dropped out. Tough family to live up to, I guess. I nearly choked on my water but managed to maintain my composure. Is that so? And what school does Michael attend? The resident looked confused. You know, he never specifically says. Just talks about his patients and his research. I assume Johns Hopkins based on the gear he wears. I simply nodded and changed the subject, but later that night, I searched social media and found recent photos of Michael wearing a Johns Hopkins medicine sweatshirt and stethoscope in what appeared to be staged doctor photos. He was using my accomplishments to create an entirely fictional medical career for himself, while my parents continued spreading the lie that I was the failure. I could have exposed him. A single phone call to the right people would have unraveled the entire fabrication. But something held me back, perhaps the last remnant of family loyalty, or simply the knowledge that my actual work was more important than correcting public perception. Instead, I channeled my frustration into my work. My innovative surgical technique continued to evolve, and I published several more papers. By my 6th year of residency, I was being invited to present at international conferences and had started training other surgeons in my methods. Dr. Harrison, once my intimidating superior, now consulted me on difficult cases. Mitchell has the best hands I've seen in 30 years of neurosurgery, I overheard him telling a colleague. And her spatial reasoning is off the charts. When I completed my residency, Massachusetts General created a special attending physician position specifically for me, unusual for someone so early in their career. 2 years later, at 32, I was nominated for the position of Chief of Neurosurgery after Dr. Harrison announced his early retirement. I'm recommending you as my replacement, he told me matter-of-factly. The committee will consider other candidates, of course, but they'd be fools not to select you. The appointment was historic. I became the youngest chief of neurosurgery in the hospital's history and one of the few women to hold the position at a major medical center. The announcement made medical news, with profiles in several journals and even a mention in the Boston Globe. Throughout all this success, I maintained my privacy about my estrangement from my family. Colleagues knew I didn't go home for holidays or take time off for family events, but I deflected personal questions with vague references to a complicated relationship. Even my closest friends at the hospital didn't know the full story of how thoroughly my family had erased my actual achievements and replaced them with a fictional narrative of failure. Then came the call that would change everything. Dr. Mitchell, this is your cousin Thomas. I'm sorry to bother you at work, but Michael's been admitted to Boston Memorial with severe abdominal pain. They're saying it's appendicitis with complications, and he needs to be transferred to a better-equipped hospital. I gripped the phone tightly. Is it serious? Serious enough that they're recommending transfer to Mass General, your hospital. I thought you should know since your parents are driving up from Connecticut now. They don't know you work there. For a moment, I considered recusing myself, ensuring Michael would be treated by other physicians while I remained invisible. But after 7 years of separation and lies, perhaps it was finally time for the truth. Thank you for letting me know, Thomas. I'll make sure he receives excellent care. I hung up, my heart pounding as I realized that my carefully separated worlds were about to collide. The day I was officially appointed Chief of Neurosurgery should have been the pinnacle moment of pride in my career. The ceremony was attended by hospital board members, distinguished physicians, and even the mayor of Boston. As I accepted the position, becoming the youngest department chief in the hospital's 200-year history, the applause was thunderous. Dr. Mitchell represents the future of medicine, the hospital director announced. Her innovative surgical techniques have already saved hundreds of lives previously considered beyond help. Afterward, there was a reception where colleagues congratulated me and medical journal reporters requested interviews. Throughout it all, I maintained the polite smile and humble demeanor expected of me, while inside I couldn't help wondering what my parents would think if they could see me now. The irony wasn't lost on me that on the same day I reached this career milestone, my estranged brother was being admitted to Boston Memorial Hospital with what was initially diagnosed as appendicitis. According to my cousin Thomas, complications had developed and Michael would need to be transferred to a facility with more advanced care. I knew the protocol. Mass General, as the premier medical center in the region, would be the natural choice for transfer. As chief of neurosurgery, I wouldn't typically be involved in an appendicitis case, but I found myself checking the incoming transfer list throughout the day. Dr. Mitchell? My assistant looked concerned as she entered my office. I thought you should know there's a patient being transferred from Boston Memorial with your same last name. Michael Mitchell? Any relation? I took a deep breath. Yes, he's my brother. Her eyebrows raised slightly. I'd never mentioned having a brother in the 5 years she'd worked with me. Oh! Well, he's being admitted under Dr. Sanderson in general surgery. Apparently, there are some complications with his appendicitis that might involve infection spreading to other organs. Thank you for letting me know, I said, trying to sound casual. Please don't mention our relationship to anyone. I'd prefer to keep my personal and professional lives separate. As the day progressed, I found myself facing an ethical dilemma. Should I involve myself in Michael's case? Check his chart? Visit him? The professional part of me said to maintain distance. Doctors typically don't treat family members due to emotional complications. But another part, perhaps the part still hurting from years of lies and dismissal, wanted to see this confrontation through. I decided on a middle path. I wouldn't directly involve myself in his treatment, but I would monitor his case from a distance, ensuring he received the best care possible. Not because he deserved it after years of taking credit for my accomplishments, but because that's what a good doctor would do. Later that afternoon, my assistant informed me that Michael had arrived and was being settled in room 412. She also mentioned that 2 people identifying themselves as his parents were with him. My parents, just a few floors away after 7 years of separation. I understand Mr. Mitchell is telling the nursing staff he's a medical student here, she added with confusion. But we don't have any record of him in our program. Of course he was. Even lying in a hospital bed, Michael couldn't resist continuing his charade. I pulled up his medical records on my computer, a technical breach of protocol since he wasn't my patient, but as department chief, I had access to all patient files. The diagnosis was concerning: perforated appendix with signs of peritonitis and potential sepsis developing. He would need immediate surgery and aggressive antibiotic treatment. As I scrolled through his intake forms, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Under allergies, there was no mention of his severe cephalosporin allergy, a potentially fatal reaction to a common class of antibiotics that would likely be used for his infection. I immediately called Dr. Sanderson. Jim, it's Hazel. I need to tell you something about your new transfer, Michael Mitchell. The medical student with appendicitis? What about him? I paused, choosing my words carefully. First, he's not a medical student here or anywhere else. Second, and more importantly, he has a severe allergy to cephalosporins that's not in his chart. He developed it as a teenager. Anaphylaxis with hives and throat swelling. There was a moment of silence. How do you know this, Hazel? He's my brother. Another pause. I didn't know you had a brother. There's a lot about my family I don't discuss, I said simply. Please make sure his allergy is noted prominently in his chart. I'd appreciate if you kept our relationship confidential for now. After hanging up, I sat at my desk, turning over the possibilities in my mind. My parents and brother were in the same building as me for the first time in 7 years. They still had no idea about my actual position or achievements. Part of me wanted to maintain that separation, to continue letting them believe whatever fictional version of my life they had constructed. But another part, perhaps the stronger part, was tired of hiding. Tired of allowing them to diminish me even in my absence. My grandmother's words echoed in my mind. Promise you'll become whatever you want to be, not what anyone else thinks you should be. I had kept that promise to her. Perhaps it was time to reveal that truth. As I deliberated, my office phone rang again. It was Rebecca Santos, the head nurse on the surgical floor. Dr. Mitchell, I'm sorry to bother you, but there's a situation with the patient in 412. His father is being quite difficult with the staff, demanding to speak to the real doctors and not the residents. He's also insisting his son knows more about proper medical care than our nurses because he's almost a doctor himself. Dr. Sanderson is in surgery, and I thought you might want to intervene before this escalates. It seemed the decision had been made for me. I'll be right there, Rebecca. I straightened my white coat with the embroidered Hazel Mitchell, MD, Chief of Neurosurgery, and my hospital ID badge. 7 years of silence was about to end. As I approached room 412, I could hear my father's voice through the partially open door, the familiar authoritative tone that had dominated my childhood. My son is practically a doctor himself, he was saying loudly. He's in advanced medical training at Johns Hopkins. The same program where our daughter failed, ironically enough. Some people just aren't cut out for the pressure. I paused outside the door, my heart pounding. Through the narrow opening, I could see my mother sitting beside Michael's bed, adjusting his pillows with the same doting attention she'd always shown him. Michael himself looked pale and drawn with pain, but was apparently still committed to the charade. The problem with hospitals like Boston Memorial is they don't recognize sepsis early enough, he was explaining weakly to a nurse who was checking his IV. At Johns Hopkins, where I study, we have advanced protocols for. Actually, early sepsis recognition rates at Boston Memorial have improved by 40% in the past 2 years, the nurse interrupted politely. And this is Massachusetts General Hospital, not Boston Memorial. You were transferred. I took a deep breath and walked in. The nurse recognized me immediately and straightened up. Dr. Mitchell. I was just explaining to the patient about his antibiotic regimen. My mother glanced up briefly, then back at Michael, not registering who had entered. My father turned with an impatient expression that froze when his eyes met mine. Michael stared in shock, his mouth slightly open. Thank you, Kelly, I said to the nurse. I'll take it from here. Of course, doctor, she replied, stepping aside deferentially. My father recovered first. Hazel? What are you doing here? Are you working here? I maintained my professional demeanor. I'm Dr. Mitchell, yes. I understand there's some confusion about the patient's care. My mother finally looked at me properly, her eyes widening as she took in my white coat and the stethoscope around my neck. You're a nurse here? Before I could answer, Rebecca Santos, the head nurse I'd spoken with earlier, entered the room carrying Michael's updated chart. She looked between me and my family, clearly sensing the tension. Dr. Mitchell, I've updated the patient's chart with the allergy information you provided. Dr. Sanderson wanted to confirm you'll be available to consult if needed, given your familiarity with the case. Then came the moment that would change everything. Rebecca, looking at my mother who still appeared confused, added helpfully, Are you just meeting Dr. Mitchell? She's our chief of neurosurgery, youngest in the hospital's history. The medical journal did that big feature on her pioneering surgical technique last month. Everyone's been talking about it. The room went completely silent. My mother's face drained of color, and she reached for the edge of Michael's bed to steady herself. My father's expression cycled rapidly through confusion, disbelief, and something that might have been shame. Are you the chief doctor everyone's talking about? Rebecca continued, oblivious to the family drama unfolding. The one who developed the Mitchell approach for inoperable brain tumors? My mother swayed slightly, looking as though she might actually faint. My father moved to support her, his face ashen. That's not possible, he muttered, though there was no conviction in his voice. Hazel couldn't even handle medical school. She dropped out years ago. Michael, to his credit, looked mortified. Dad, he said quietly, I think we need to stop. Rebecca looked confused. I'm sorry, there must be some misunderstanding. Dr. Mitchell completed her medical degree at Johns Hopkins with highest honors before her residency here. She's published 12 major research papers and performed over 500 successful brain surgeries using her innovative technique. The Mitchell approach is being taught in medical schools worldwide. My father was still shaking his head in denial. No. You must have her confused with someone else. Our daughter works at a pharmacy in Ohio. Michael is the doctor in the family. He's at Johns Hopkins doing research on. Dad, Michael interrupted more firmly. Stop. Please. I finally spoke, keeping my voice calm and professional despite the emotional turmoil inside. Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, I understand this is a shock. However, right now my concern is for my patient's well-being. Michael has a serious condition requiring immediate attention. My mother found her voice at last. You're actually a doctor? A brain surgeon? Chief of neurosurgery, I corrected gently. And yes, I completed medical school 7 years ago, followed by my residency here. I never dropped out of anything. My father's face had turned from pale to red. But Michael told us. He said you'd failed out of pre-med and were too embarrassed to tell us. I looked at my brother, who couldn't meet my eyes. Did he? The room fell into uncomfortable silence again, broken only by the beeping of Michael's monitors. Rebecca, finally sensing the personal nature of the conversation, excused herself tactfully. I'll let you have some privacy. Dr. Mitchell, Dr. Sanderson will be out of surgery in 20 minutes to discuss the case. Once she left, my mother began to cry softly. I don't understand. All this time, we thought. You thought what you wanted to think, I said, more sharply than I intended. You believed Michael because it fit the narrative you'd already created, that he was the successful one and I was the disappointment. Michael shifted uncomfortably in the hospital bed. Hazel, I'm sorry. It just started as a small lie and then spiraled. Mom and Dad were so disappointed when I lost my scholarship, and then when I dropped out entirely, it was easier to let them think you had failed instead. My father was still struggling to process the revelation. But we never heard from you. Never saw your name anywhere. How were we supposed to know? You could have asked me, I replied simply. You could have called Johns Hopkins instead of just believing what you were told. You could have shown even a fraction of the interest in my career that you showed in Michael's fictional one. A look of realization crossed my mother's face. The Mitchell approach, that medical breakthrough we read about last year. That was you. I nodded. But the article said Dr. Mitchell was one of the most promising neurosurgeons in the country, my father said, still sounding disbelieving. Yes, I confirmed. That would be me. Michael winced. Whether from physical pain or emotional discomfort wasn't clear. Hazel, I used some of your actual achievements in my stories. I told them about the surgical technique, but I said I was developing it. I looked at him with more pity than anger. I know. I've heard bits and pieces over the years about your supposed medical career. Quite impressive for someone who never attended a single day of medical school. My father tried a different approach. Why didn't you tell us about your success? We're your parents. We had a right to know. A right? I repeated, raising an eyebrow. You lost any right to know about my life when you dismissed every achievement I ever had. When you missed my white coat ceremony to attend Michael's game. When you told the entire family I had dropped out when I was actually at the top of my class. My mother was openly sobbing now. We didn't know. How could we have known? You could have asked, I repeated, or shown up, or called, or done any of the things parents typically do. The tension was interrupted by Michael's monitors beeping more rapidly. His face had grown paler, and he was sweating profusely. My doctor instincts immediately took over, personal feelings set aside. I stepped to his bedside, checking his pulse and the monitors. Michael, how's your pain? Scale of 1 to 10? 8. Maybe 9, he gasped. It's spreading across my abdomen. I pressed the call button. His peritonitis is worsening. He needs surgery immediately. When the nursing team rushed in, I switched fully to physician mode, relaying Michael's status and necessary preparations. Dr. Sanderson arrived moments later and, after a quick assessment, agreed with my evaluation. He needs to go to the OR now, Dr. Sanderson confirmed. The infection is spreading faster than we anticipated. My parents watched this exchange in stunned silence, seeing me in my element for the first time, confident, authoritative, respected by the medical team around me. As they prepared to wheel Michael to surgery, he grabbed my hand. Hazel, I'm sorry. For everything. I've been living in your shadow, pretending to be you, because I couldn't face being myself. Despite everything, I felt a pang of sympathy. We'll talk after your surgery. Focus on getting better now. My parents started to follow as Michael was wheeled out, but I stopped them. The surgery will take at least 2 hours. You should wait in the family room. Will he be okay? My mother asked tearfully. I considered sugarcoating it, but honesty seemed important now. The infection is serious, but he's young and otherwise healthy. Dr. Sanderson is excellent. My father looked at me with new eyes, as though seeing me for the first time. Will you be involved in his surgery? I hesitated. Typically, surgeons didn't operate on family members due to emotional complications. But this was an exceptional situation, and I was uniquely qualified to assist if complications arose. I'll consult if needed, I finally said. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to review his case with the surgical team. As I walked away, I heard my father say to my mother in a shocked whisper, "Our daughter is a brain surgeon, chief of neurosurgery." How did we not know? How indeed, I thought, as I headed toward the OR to ensure my brother received the care he needed, despite everything that had happened between us. Michael's surgery lasted nearly 4 hours. What had begun as a relatively straightforward appendectomy became complicated when the surgical team discovered the infection had spread more extensively than initially thought. I waited with my parents in the family room for the first hour, the silence between us heavy with unspoken words and emotions. I need to check on some patients, I finally said, standing to leave. It wasn't entirely untrue. I did have responsibilities, but it was also an escape from the suffocating tension. Hazel, my father said as I reached the door. I don't understand how all this happened. I turned back. All what, Dad? My becoming a doctor despite your low expectations, or your believing for 7 years that I was a failure. He had no answer for that. I spent the next 3 hours reviewing files in my office, occasionally checking on Michael's surgery progress. When Dr. Sanderson called to report a complication, unexpected bleeding that was difficult to control, I made the decision to join the operation. Not as a sister, but as the chief of neurosurgery whose expertise might be needed. In the OR, I maintained complete professionalism, assisting with the complex case without any hint of our personal connection. When the bleeding was finally controlled and Michael was stabilized, Dr. Sanderson looked at me with newfound respect. Your brother is lucky to have you, Dr. Mitchell. Not many patients get the hospital chief in their operating room. I nodded, removing my surgical gloves. Please let his parents know the surgery was successful but complicated. He'll need to stay in the ICU overnight. Michael remained sedated through the night. I checked on him between my scheduled surgeries the next day, mostly when my parents were taking breaks from their bedside vigil. By evening, he was awake and stable enough to be moved to a regular room. I waited until visiting hours were over to have our first real conversation. He looked small in the hospital bed, tubes and monitors still attached, a far cry from the confident person who had been impersonating a doctor just days before. How are you feeling? I asked, checking his chart at the foot of his bed. Like someone ripped out my appendix and then some, he attempted to joke, then grew serious. Hazel, I don't even know where to begin. I sat in the chair beside his bed. Neither do I, Michael. 7 years is a long time. He looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time since we were children. You're actually a brain surgeon. Chief of neurosurgery. I've been pretending to be what you actually are. Why? I asked simply. Why create such an elaborate lie? Why use my life as your fiction? He was quiet for a moment. When I lost my scholarship, Dad was so disappointed. You know how he always wanted to be a doctor himself. Then when I dropped out entirely, I couldn't face it. One day, I mentioned something about medical research I'd read, and they just assumed I was considering med school. It snowballed from there. And telling them I had failed instead? Michael had the decency to look ashamed. That was the worst part. When they started asking why they never heard about your college graduation, I panicked and said you'd dropped out. It was easier than explaining why we weren't in touch. And once that lie was out there, I couldn't take it back. You could have, I countered. At any point in 7 years, you could have told the truth. I know, he admitted. But then I'd have to face being the family disappointment. You don't know what that's like. I couldn't help but laugh, a short, bitter sound. I don't know what that's like? Michael, I spent my entire childhood being compared unfavorably to you. Nothing I accomplished was ever good enough because it wasn't what you did. I was the family disappointment long before you took my achievements and claimed them as your own. His eyes filled with tears. You're right. I never saw it that way as a kid, but looking back, they always did treat us differently. I'm sorry, Hazel. I really am. It wasn't enough, not nearly enough for 7 years of lies, but it was a start. What will you do now? I asked. Now that the truth is out. I don't know, he admitted. Go back to Connecticut, figure out what I actually want to do with my life instead of living a fantasy version of yours. We talked for another hour. About his actual failed business ventures, about my medical school experiences, about the distance that had grown between us. It wasn't a miraculous reconciliation, but it was honest in a way our relationship had never been before. The next morning, I arrived at the hospital early to find my parents already in Michael's room. They fell silent when I entered, my father looking uncomfortable and my mother dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Hazel, my mother began hesitantly. We've been talking with Michael about everything. I remained standing near the door, arms crossed. And? My father cleared his throat. We owe you an apology. Many apologies, actually. For what specifically? I asked, not making this easy for them. For dismissing every achievement I ever had? For missing my white coat ceremony? For believing I was a failure without ever bothering to check? For all of it, my mother said softly. We had no idea. Because you never asked, I finished for her. You never called. You never visited. You created a narrative about me that fit what you already believed, and you never questioned it. My father stood up straighter. Now wait a minute. You cut us off too. You could have told us about your success. Would you have believed me? I challenged. Or would you have thought I was lying to compete with Michael's fictional medical career? He had no answer for that. The truth is, I continued, I stopped telling you about my achievements long before I stopped communicating entirely. Every time I shared a success, it was dismissed or forgotten in favor of whatever Michael was doing. So eventually, I stopped sharing. My mother was crying again. We never meant to make you feel that way. Intentions don't change impact, I replied, a phrase I'd learned in a hospital management course that seemed particularly apt now. You may not have meant to hurt me, but you did. Repeatedly and consistently, for years. Michael spoke up from his bed. They know, Hazel. We've been talking all morning. I've been telling them how wrong we all were. I looked at each of them in turn, my brother in the hospital bed, my father standing awkwardly by the window, my mother clutching her tissue. This was my family, flawed and human, and finally facing reality. I don't know what happens from here, I said honestly. I've built a life without you in it. A successful, fulfilling life. Could we be part of it now? My mother asked tentatively. Now that we know who you really are? I considered this. That depends. Can you accept who I really am? Not the daughter you wanted me to be, but the person I actually am. We're proud of you, Hazel, my father said, his voice rough with emotion. We should have been proud all along. It wasn't enough, not yet. But it was a beginning. Over the next few days, as Michael recovered enough for discharge, we had more conversations, painful, honest ones where years of resentment and misunderstanding were finally addressed. There were no magical solutions or instant healing, but there was truth where there had been lies and acknowledgement where there had been dismissal. I set clear boundaries for any future relationship. I wouldn't be coming home for every holiday or calling weekly as if nothing had happened. Trust would need to be rebuilt slowly, if at all. I'd like to come see where you work, my father said the day Michael was discharged. See this Mitchell approach in action, if that's possible. It's not a spectator sport, Dad, I replied with a small smile. But I could show you my research lab sometime. As they prepared to leave, Michael pulled me aside. I've been thinking about what to do next. Maybe something in hospital administration? Not pretending to be a doctor, but actually helping in healthcare somehow. That could be good, I agreed. But figure out what you want first, not what you think others want from you. My mother hugged me goodbye, holding on a bit too long. I'm so sorry we missed everything, Hazel. Your graduation, your white coat ceremony, your accomplishments. You didn't miss everything, I told her. Just the past. The future is still unwritten. After they left, I returned to my office, processing the emotional whirlwind of the past week. On my desk was a framed photo of my grandmother Margaret, the only family member who had truly seen me. I kept my promise, I whispered to her image. The next day, I returned to my regular schedule, morning rounds, 2 complicated surgeries, a research meeting, and administrative duties. But something had shifted inside me. The weight of being unseen, unacknowledged by my family, had lifted. Not because I'd finally received their approval, but because I'd finally accepted that I hadn't needed it all along. A month later, I established the Margaret Wilson Scholarship for underestimated students pursuing neuroscience, named for my grandmother who had believed in me when no one else did. The first recipient was a brilliant young woman whose family had similarly dismissed her ambitions. My relationship with my family continued to evolve slowly. Michael enrolled in a healthcare management program, finally pursuing his own path rather than a fictional version of mine. My parents made awkward but genuine efforts to understand my work and my life. During a rare dinner together 6 months after our hospital reunion, my mother asked, "Do you think you'll ever fully forgive us, Hazel?" I considered this carefully before answering. I think forgiveness isn't a destination but a process. I'm not doing this to prove you wrong anymore. I'm doing it because it's who I always was, whether you saw it or not. And that, perhaps, was the most important lesson of all. The validation I'd sought for so long had always been within me, in the lives I saved, the research I advanced, and the promise I kept to the one person who had truly believed in me from the beginning. Have you ever been underestimated by family or friends, only to prove them wrong through your accomplishments? Share your story in the comments below. If this video resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories of resilience and triumph. Don't forget to hit that share button if you know someone who needs to hear this message of perseverance and self-belief. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the people who should believe in you the most are the last to recognize your true potential. I'm Lindsay, 32, and my life as a financial advisor taught me everything about money except how it would nearly destroy my family. My younger sister Diana, 27, was always the favorite, the princess who got everything she wanted. Until she demanded $38,000 for a luxury car to impress her friends. When I refused, I never imagined she'd throw boiling coffee in my face and set my car ablaze in my own driveway. But my silence afterward confused her. One calculated move was all it took to bring her to her knees, begging for forgiveness. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up to a toxic family member. Growing up in Boston's middle-class suburbs wasn't extraordinary, but our family dynamics were. Our parents, Margaret and Robert, worked themselves to exhaustion to give us comfortable lives. Mom was a dedicated nurse, working long shifts at Massachusetts General, while Dad built a small accounting practice from scratch. They instilled strong values in us both. At least they tried to. From the beginning, Diana and I were different. I saved my allowance. She spent hers before getting home from the store. I completed chores without prompting. Diana needed bribes and threats. My room was organized. Hers looked like a tornado testing ground. These differences might seem trivial, but they were early indicators of the fundamental disconnect in how we approached life. What really set our paths apart was how our parents responded to our behaviors. When I achieved something, honor roll, swim team captain, summer job promotions, I received measured praise and encouragement to keep working hard. But Diana's smallest accomplishments triggered excessive celebration. If she managed to clean her room, Mom would take her shopping. If she passed a test, not even aced it, just passed, Dad would take her for ice cream. Diana's more sensitive. Mom would explain when I questioned the disparity. She needs more encouragement. Dad would add, "You're naturally motivated, Lindsay. You don't need the extra push." By 12, I understood the imbalance, but accepted it as our family's operating system. Diana learned something different, that tears, tantrums, and manipulation yielded rewards. I remember my 16th birthday. After saving for months, I was $200 short of buying my first car, a used Honda with 120,000 miles, but perfect maintenance records. I'd researched it carefully, negotiated the price down, and planned to pay insurance through my after-school job. When I asked Dad if I could borrow the remaining $200, which I would repay, he hesitated, explaining finances were tight. That same week, Diana wanted an expensive dress for a middle school dance. Without hesitation, Mom and Dad spent $350 on the dress, shoes, and professional hairstyling. When I pointed out the inconsistency, Mom said, "Diana needs confidence. This is important for her social development." Everything changed when I was 17 and Diana was 12. Our parents' divorce shattered our family. The warning signs had been there: hushed arguments after we went to bed, separate vacations, growing silence at dinner. But the actual separation hit us differently. I channeled my grief into responsibility. With Mom now working extra shifts to compensate for the reduced household income, I stepped up, cooking, helping Diana with homework, managing grocery shopping. Meanwhile, Diana's entitled behavior intensified. She blamed our parents for ruining her life and demanded compensation in the form of new clothes, electronics, and special privileges. After high school, I worked through college at Northeastern, double majoring in finance and economics while juggling part-time jobs. Diana, meanwhile, barely graduated high school before dropping out of community college after one semester, claiming it was boring and pointless. While I shared a cramped apartment with 3 roommates to save money, Diana continuously cycled through retail jobs, quitting whenever a manager disrespected her by asking her to arrive on time or complete basic tasks. Our parents, especially Mom, continued enabling her. "She's finding herself," Mom would say after Diana quit her 5th job in 8 months. Dad was slightly more realistic, but still covered her rent when she couldn't pay. I tried having conversations with them about the long-term damage they were doing, but they dismissed my concerns as sibling rivalry. By 30, I had built a respectable career as a financial advisor at a Boston firm. I had a comfortable condo, a solid emergency fund, and investments growing steadily. Diana, at 25, had a sporadic employment history, mounting credit card debt, and a revolving door of friendships and relationships that inevitably collapsed under her expectations that others should cater to her needs. Despite everything, I tried maintaining a relationship with Diana. We'd meet for Sunday brunches occasionally, though these often ended with Diana complaining about her latest workplace injustice or friendship drama. I'd listen patiently, offer practical advice she'd ignore, and pick up the check while she was in the bathroom. Last Thanksgiving at Mom's house highlighted our dysfunction perfectly. I arrived early to help cook, bringing wine and dessert. Diana showed up 2 hours late, empty-handed, and announced she couldn't stay long because her friends were having a party. Mom rearranged the entire dinner schedule to accommodate her while I silently mashed potatoes and bit my tongue. When Diana complimented my promotion with backhanded praise, "Must be nice having a boring, stable job," I smiled and changed the subject. Family peace seemed worth the occasional discomfort. I never imagined that maintaining that peace would cost me so much more than my pride. The call came on a Tuesday evening in April. I was reviewing client portfolios in my home office when Diana's name flashed on my phone screen. Considering she rarely called unless she needed something, I braced myself before answering. "Lindsay, thank God you picked up." Her voice had that artificial brightness that always preceded a request. "How's my successful big sister doing?" "I'm good, just working. What's up?" I kept my tone neutral, already anticipating what was coming. "So I've been thinking about my transportation situation," Diana began, as though she'd been contemplating a serious life philosophy rather than her latest whim. "My friends all have these amazing cars, and I'm still driving that old Civic Dad helped me buy 4 years ago." The Civic was perfectly functional and had low mileage, something I pointed out as she continued. "I found the perfect solution. There's this gorgeous BMW 3 Series at the dealership near me. It's exactly what I need for my new job." Diana had recently started as a receptionist at a real estate office, her longest employment stretch in years at 3 months. "That's great that you're saving up for a car upgrade," I replied, deliberately misunderstanding. "Well, that's why I'm calling you." Her voice shifted to what I called her little girl tone, the one she used with our parents when she wanted something expensive. "I need about $38,000 to make this happen." I nearly choked. $38,000? Diana, that's not a small loan. That's a massive financial commitment. But you have the money. I know how much financial advisors make. This is nothing for you. I took a deep breath. My finances aren't relevant here. That's an extremely expensive car for someone just starting a new job. Have you looked at more affordable options? I don't want affordable options. I deserve something nice for once. Her voice rose sharply. After everything I've been through. The conversation devolved from there. Diana cycled through her usual tactics. Guilt. You've always had everything easier than me. Appeals to family obligation. We're sisters. We're supposed to help each other. And hypothetical parental approval. Dad would want you to help me. When those failed, she switched to promises. She'd pay me back every cent. This car would help her keep her job. It would give her the confidence to finally get her life together. When I still refused, suggesting instead that I could help her find a reliable used car in the $10,000 range, her true colors emerged. "You've always been so selfish. You think you're better than everyone because you have your perfect little life and your perfect little job. You've never supported me." The irony of being called unsupportive by someone asking for $38,000 wasn't lost on me. "Diana, I'm not giving you that money. It's financially irresponsible, and it wouldn't actually help you in the long run. You'll regret this," she hissed before hanging up. That night, I called my boyfriend Jason to vent. We'd been dating for 2 years, and he'd witnessed enough of Diana's behavior to understand the situation. "You absolutely did the right thing," he assured me. "She's an adult. She needs to learn financial responsibility, not get rewarded for lacking it." "I know," I sighed, "but I hate that every interaction with her has to be a battle. I just wish we could have a normal sister relationship." "That requires 2 emotionally healthy people," Jason pointed out gently. "You can only control your side of that equation." I thought the matter was closed until 2 days later when Diana appeared at my workplace. I was with a client when my assistant Rachel rushed in during a break. "There's a woman in the lobby causing a scene," she whispered. "Says she's your sister and needs to see you immediately. She's getting pretty loud." Mortified, I excused myself and hurried to the lobby. Diana stood near the reception desk, her voice carrying throughout the open space. "I know she's here. Just tell her Diana needs to talk to her right now about our family emergency." "Diana," I hissed, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward a side hallway. "What are you doing?" "I'm with clients." "Well, you wouldn't answer my calls," she shot back. My phone showed 3 missed calls from her that morning while I was in meetings. "So you thought coming to my workplace and making a scene was appropriate?" I kept my voice low, aware of curious glances from colleagues and clients. "I needed to make sure you understood how serious this is," Diana insisted. "The dealership won't hold the car much longer." I already told my friends about it. Several coworkers pretended not to listen while clearly hanging on every word. My reputation for professionalism and calm decision-making was being undermined by this childish display. "I'm not discussing this here," I stated firmly. My answer hasn't changed. "I'm not giving you $38,000 for a luxury car." Diana's face contorted with rage. "Fine. Have it your way. But don't think this is over." She raised her voice deliberately. "Everyone should know what kind of person you really are. Someone who has plenty of money but won't help her own sister." As she stormed out, knocking over a potted plant for dramatic effect, I felt my cheeks burning with embarrassment. My boss, Sandra, approached cautiously. "Everything okay?" she asked, concern evident in her expression. "Family matter," I replied tersely. "I apologize for the disruption." "Don't worry about it," Sandra said kindly. "We all have family. Take a minute if you need it." I didn't take that minute. Instead, I straightened my blazer, plastered on a professional smile, and returned to my client meeting. But Diana's parting words echoed ominously in my mind. "Don't think this is over." I had no idea how prophetic those words would prove to be. The confrontation at my office left me drained. By the time I finished damage control with colleagues and completed my client meetings, it was nearly 7 in the evening. The spring sun was setting as I drove home, mentally rehearsing how I'd explain the situation if Sandra brought it up again tomorrow. My professional reputation had taken years to build. Diana had nearly dented it in minutes. When I pulled into my driveway, I was surprised to see Diana's Civic parked on the street. She sat on my front steps, 2 coffee cups beside her. My first instinct was wariness, but something in her posture, shoulders slumped, head down, suggested contrition. "Hey," she said as I approached. "I brought peace offerings." She held up a coffee cup from my favorite local shop. I hesitated before accepting it. "Thanks. I didn't expect to see you after earlier." "I know. I'm really sorry about that." Diana's voice sounded genuinely remorseful. "I was way out of line coming to your workplace." I was just frustrated and not thinking clearly. Hope flickered in my chest. Maybe this was a breakthrough moment, Diana taking responsibility, acknowledging boundaries. We walked inside, and I set my bag down, relief washing over me at the thought that we might actually resolve this like adults. "I've been thinking about what you said," Diana continued, perching on my kitchen counter while I hung up my coat. "About financial responsibility and everything." "I appreciate that," I said, reaching for the coffee cup. "I really do want to help you, just in ways that are actually beneficial long-term." "I get it now," Diana nodded, watching me intently as I raised the cup to my lips. The coffee seemed unusually hot for something purchased at least 20 minutes ago. I had barely taken a sip when Diana's expression changed, from contrition to cold satisfaction. In that split second, I realized my mistake. "Actually," she said, sliding off the counter, "what I realized is that you've always been a self-righteous bitch who thinks she knows best." With a deliberate motion, she reached out and knocked the bottom of my coffee cup upward. The scalding liquid exploded into my face, the pain immediate and shocking. I screamed, dropping the cup as the burning coffee soaked my blouse and skin. "That's for thinking you're better than me," Diana snarled as I stumbled to the sink, desperately trying to splash cold water on my burning face and neck. Through my pain and shock, I heard her continue, "Maybe next time you'll think twice before refusing to help family." The front door slammed as I fumbled for my phone, my vision blurred by tears of pain. I called 911, barely able to explain what happened through my shock. The dispatcher kept me on the line until the ambulance arrived 10 minutes later. The EMTs worked quickly, assessing the burns on my face, neck, and chest. First-degree burns mostly, possibly second-degree in spots, one told me as they helped me onto a stretcher. You did the right thing getting cold water on it immediately. In the ambulance, my phone rang. My neighbor, Mrs. Whitaker. Lindsay? There's something wrong at your house. There's smoke coming from your driveway, and I think it's your car. My car. I repeated, confused through the pain medication the EMTs had administered. The fire department is already here, but you should know, I saw your sister running away just before I noticed the smoke. I recognized her from your family barbecue last summer. The EMT gently took the phone from my shaking hand. Ma'am, she's en route to the hospital for burn treatment. Can you give this information to the police when they arrive? At the hospital, everything moved in a blur of bright lights and concerned voices. The doctor confirmed mostly first-degree burns with a small patch of second-degree burn on my right cheek. You'll heal completely, she assured me, though you might have some redness for a few weeks. While a nurse applied medicated ointment to my burns, 2 police officers arrived to take my statement. They confirmed what Mrs. Whitaker had told me. Diana had set my car on fire in the driveway after assaulting me. A gas can was found nearby with her fingerprints. We have enough evidence to arrest your sister for assault and arson, Officer Reynolds explained. Do you want to press charges? The question hung in the air. Despite everything, Diana was still my sister. The thought of her in handcuffs in a jail cell made my stomach clench despite the pain she'd caused me. Can I think about it? I asked finally. Officer Reynolds nodded sympathetically. Take some time, but not too long. This kind of behavior typically escalates if there are no consequences. Jason arrived at the hospital, his face pale with shock and anger when he saw my bandaged face. I can't believe she did this to you, he said, gently taking my hand. Tell me your pressing charges. I don't know yet, I admitted. It's complicated. There's nothing complicated about it, Jason insisted. She assaulted you and committed arson. She could have killed you. He was right, of course. The doctors had explained how fortunate I was that the coffee hadn't hit my eyes. The car fire could have spread to my house if the fire department hadn't responded so quickly. Diana's actions weren't just vindictive, they were dangerous. Yet as I lay in the hospital bed, pain medication dulling both my burns and my thoughts, I couldn't help remembering Diana as a little girl, following me around, wanting to wear my clothes, asking me to read her stories. Somewhere beneath the entitled, angry adult was the sister I'd once protected and loved. The sister I still loved, despite everything. I need time to think, I told Jason. He nodded, though his clenched jaw told me he disagreed. Whatever you decide, I'm here for you. But Lindsay, at some point, protecting yourself has to take priority over protecting her from consequences. As I drifted off to sleep in the hospital room, one thought crystallized through the medication haze. This pattern couldn't continue. Something had to change fundamentally in our relationship. The question was whether that change would come through legal channels or if there might be another way, a way that could potentially heal rather than just punish. I had no answers yet, but as the medication pulled me under, a plan began forming in the back of my mind. The hospital discharged me the following day with medication, specialized burn cream, and strict instructions to keep the affected areas clean and protected. Jason drove me home, where I faced the charred remains of my car in the driveway, a stark reminder of Diana's vengeance. I'll arrange for a rental car, Jason offered, guiding me inside. And I'm staying with you for a few days. No arguments. I didn't have the energy to protest. The pain medication made thinking difficult, but one decision had solidified. I wouldn't respond to Diana immediately. This wasn't forgiveness. It was strategy. While conventional wisdom urged immediate action, press charges, file restraining orders, cut all contact, something told me that would only reinforce Diana's victim mentality. She'd frame herself as the persecuted party, garner sympathy from our parents and friends, and learn nothing. Instead, I chose silence. Calculated, deliberate silence. I don't understand, Jason said when I explained my decision. She needs to face consequences. She will, I promised. But not in the way she expects. First, I documented everything. With Jason's help, I photographed my injuries from multiple angles, cataloging the healing process daily. I collected medical reports, ambulance bills, and treatment recommendations. We took extensive pictures of my destroyed car and obtained the fire department's incident report. I recorded a detailed account of both attacks while the memories were fresh, including Diana's exact words. My lawyer friend Rebecca visited 3 days after the incident, wincing at my bandaged face. "This is assault, clear and simple," she stated after reviewing my documentation. Add arson and destruction of property, and she's looking at serious charges. The statute of limitations gives you time to decide, but stronger cases are built on immediate action. "I'm not ready to file charges yet," I explained. "But I want everything prepared if I decide to." Rebecca looked skeptical but nodded. "It's your decision. I'll draft the paperwork so it's ready when you need it." While I recovered at home, taking a week off work, Diana's true narrative emerged through social media and mutual friends. She'd constructed an entirely different story. According to her, I had been cruel and dismissive about her small request for help, had violently pushed her during an argument, and then tried to attack her when she came to apologize. The car fire wasn't mentioned at all. "Can you believe what she's saying?" my friend Melissa texted, forwarding screenshots of Diana's Facebook posts painting herself as the victim. "After what she did to you?" I wasn't surprised. Diana had always rewritten reality to suit her narrative. What did surprise me was how many people seemed to believe her, including our mother. "Mom called," Jason reported one evening, answering my phone while I napped. "Diana told her you two had a disagreement, and you're overreacting. She has no idea what actually happened." "Did you tell her?" I started to, but she didn't seem to want to hear it. She said Diana was very upset and hoped you two could work things out soon. The unfairness stung, but it reinforced my approach. Direct confrontation wouldn't work with Diana or with those who enabled her behavior. I needed documentation, witnesses, and irrefutable evidence. Meanwhile, Diana grew increasingly unsettled by my silence. Her initial triumphant social media posts gave way to confusion, then paranoia. Some people think they can just ignore you when they're in the wrong. Funny how certain individuals disappear when they know they've messed up. Getting worried about my sister. She's not responding to anyone. Hope she's not planning something crazy. Her text messages followed a similar pattern. Day 3. I hope you learned your lesson about family obligations. Day 5. Hello? Are you seriously ignoring me after everything? Day 7. Mom's worried about you. At least tell her you're okay. Day 9. What are you doing? Why won't you respond? This is childish. Day 12. Are you talking to lawyers or something? Just tell me what you're planning. I read each message but never responded. This wasn't about punishing Diana. It was about refusing to participate in her drama cycle. For the first time in her life, she couldn't predict or control my reaction, and that uncertainty was clearly unnerving her. While maintaining my silence, I worked methodically behind the scenes. I filed comprehensive insurance claims for my car and medical expenses, ensuring adjusters had full documentation of the incident's cause. I contacted my credit monitoring service to place alerts on my accounts, suspecting Diana might escalate her retaliation. That precaution proved prescient when my bank called about suspicious credit card applications in my name. We flagged it because the applications came from a different IP address than you normally use, the fraud department representative explained. Someone applied for 3 credit cards using your social security number and employment information. Can you trace the IP address? I asked, already suspecting the answer. We can't disclose that to you, but we've included it in our fraud report, which you can reference if you decide to file a police report. Identity theft. Diana had crossed yet another line, one with serious legal implications. I added this information to my growing file. Rebecca called a few days later. Lindsay, your sister's digging herself deeper. These credit card applications are federal offenses. You need to report this. Not yet, I insisted. I'm waiting for something. What could you possibly be waiting for? Rebecca sounded exasperated. She's assaulted you, committed arson, and now identity theft. What more do you need? What I needed was for Diana to understand the full weight of her actions without being able to deflect or blame others. I needed her to face reality without the cushion of enablers or the convenient narrative of being victimized by the legal system. Most importantly, I needed our parents to see the truth, not my version or Diana's version, but the unvarnished reality of who their younger daughter had become under their indulgence. 2 weeks after the attack, Diana's messages turned desperate. Lindsay, please just talk to me. I don't know what you're doing and it's freaking me out. I might have overreacted a little. Can we please just discuss this? Are you trying to get me arrested? Is that your game? At least have the decency to tell me. Her escalating panic told me my approach was working. By removing myself as the reactive audience for her drama, I'd forced Diana to sit with the consequences of her actions without the immediate gratification of seeing my response. The pieces were falling into place. Now I just needed the right moment to make my move, one decisive action that would change our family dynamic forever. That moment came sooner than I expected, delivered right to my inbox in the form of a social media message from Diana to her friend, accidentally sent to me instead. I know Lindsay thinks she has some kind of proof against me, but it's her word against mine. Mom and Dad will never believe I'd do something like that. They always take my side, LOL. It was the final confirmation I needed. Diana felt untouchable, protected by the family system that had always insulated her from consequences. She had no remorse, only concern about being caught. I forwarded the message to Rebecca with 2 words, I'm ready. 3 weeks after the attack, with my face mostly healed save for some lingering redness, I invited my parents to dinner at my condo. I told them I wanted to discuss the situation with Diana in a neutral setting. They arrived looking worried, but relieved to see me. Lindsay, we've been so concerned, Mom said, hugging me carefully. Diana said you two had a falling out, but she wouldn't give us details. A falling out, I repeated, keeping my voice neutral. That's one way to put it. Dad studied my face, noticing the healing burns. What happened to your skin? That's what we need to discuss, I replied, gesturing toward the dining table where I'd arranged several folders. Once seated, I began methodically presenting the evidence I'd gathered. First, the medical reports documenting first and second-degree burns from having hot coffee thrown in my face. Then the fire department report confirming arson as the cause of my car fire, with photos of the damage. Police statements from my neighbor who witnessed Diana fleeing the scene. Bank records showing the fraudulent credit card applications in my name, traced to Diana's IP address. My parents sat in stunned silence, their expressions shifting from confusion to disbelief to horror as the full picture emerged. This can't be right, Mom whispered, her hands shaking as she examined a photo of my burned face from the hospital. Diana wouldn't do this. I didn't want to believe it either, I said gently. But the evidence is conclusive. Dad, always more pragmatic, had turned ashen. Have you reported this to the police? I've filed preliminary reports, but haven't pressed charges yet. I wanted to speak with you first. Why? Mom asked, tears streaming down her face. Why would she do something so terrible? I explained about Diana's demand for $38,000 for a luxury car, her workplace confrontation, and her escalating threats when I refused. She's always had everything she wanted, Dad said quietly, the weight of realization in his voice. We never taught her to handle disappointment. We were just trying to support her, Mom protested weakly. She's more sensitive than you. Always needed more encouragement. Mom, I said firmly, this isn't about sensitivity. Diana assaulted me, destroyed my property, and committed identity theft because I wouldn't give her money for a luxury car. These aren't the actions of someone who's sensitive. These are the actions of someone who's never faced consequences. The silence that followed felt like a turning point, the first time my parents truly confronted the reality of their younger daughter's character. Dad finally spoke. What are you planning to do? I've prepared 3 options, I explained, pulling out another folder. First, I can press criminal charges for assault, arson, and identity theft. Given the evidence, she would likely face jail time. Mom made a small, distressed sound. Second, I can pursue civil action for damages only. This would avoid criminal penalties, but would still create a legal record of her actions. I paused before presenting the third option. Or, Diana can agree to comprehensive conditions, full repayment of all damages, intensive therapy, a public acknowledgement of her actions, and strict boundaries moving forward. The third option, Mom said immediately. We'll make sure she agrees. It's not that simple, I cautioned. This isn't about forcing compliance. Diana needs to genuinely understand the severity of her actions and commit to change. Otherwise, we'll be in this same situation again. What do you need from us? Dad asked. First, I need you both to stop enabling her behavior. No more financial bailouts, no more excuses, no more shielding her from consequences. Second, I need you to be present when I confront her with all of this evidence. They exchanged glances before nodding in agreement. The next morning, Rebecca arrived with the finalized legal documents, both the criminal complaint and the conditional agreement that could keep Diana out of court. With everything prepared, I made my first direct contact with Diana in nearly a month. We need to talk. My place, 2 p.m. today. Mom and Dad will be there. Her response was immediate. Finally. I've been trying to reach you for weeks. Are you ready to apologize for overreacting? I didn't respond, letting her interpret my silence however she chose. Diana arrived looking simultaneously defiant and nervous. She faltered visibly upon seeing our parents and Rebecca seated at the dining table, my carefully arranged evidence spread before them. What's this? Some kind of intervention, she scoffed, though her voice lacked conviction. Please sit down, Diana, I said calmly. For the next 30 minutes, I methodically presented the case against her. Medical reports, police statements, photographic evidence, credit fraud documentation, and witness testimonies. I laid out the potential legal consequences, up to 5 years in prison for the assault and arson, additional federal penalties for identity theft, and civil damages exceeding $100,000. Diana's face drained of color as the reality of her situation became undeniable. When I finished, she looked desperately toward our parents. Mom? Dad? You can't let her do this to me. It wasn't that serious. For the first time in her life, Diana found no parental shield against consequences. We've seen the evidence, Diana, Dad said, his voice heavy with disappointment. What you did was criminal. You could have seriously injured or even killed your sister. We love you, Mom added tearfully, but we can't protect you from this. You need help. Diana's defiance crumbled. I didn't mean to hurt her that badly, she whispered. I was just so angry. Intention doesn't negate consequence, Rebecca interjected professionally. The legal system doesn't particularly care whether you meant to cause second-degree burns or just first-degree burns when you threw boiling liquid in someone's face. What happens now? Diana asked, her voice small. I slid 2 documents across the table. Option 1, I file these criminal charges today. Option 2, you sign this agreement outlining conditions that must be met to avoid legal proceedings. Diana scanned the conditions, complete repayment of all damages, approximately $42,000 including medical bills and car replacement, mandatory psychological evaluation and therapy, a formal written apology acknowledging her actions, no contact with me outside of family gatherings for 6 months, and community service at a burn treatment center. This is insane. I can't afford to pay you back $42,000. You could have thought of that before destroying my $32,000 car and causing $10,000 in medical expenses, I replied evenly. The agreement includes a payment plan based on 30% of your income until the debt is cleared. It's significantly more lenient than what a court would order, plus it avoids a criminal record. Diana looked trapped, her eyes darting between the documents, our parents, and me. The gravity of her situation had finally penetrated her protective bubble of entitlement. I need to think about this, she said. You have 24 hours, I replied. After that, I filed the criminal charges. As Diana left, visibly shaken, Dad asked, Are you really prepared to send your sister to jail? I met his gaze steadily. I'm prepared to hold her accountable for her choices. For the first time in her life, Diana needs to understand that actions have consequences. What happens next is entirely up to her. The next morning, a sharp knocking woke me at 6:30 a.m. When I checked my security camera, I saw Diana on my front step, eyes red-rimmed from crying, shoulders hunched against the early spring chill. Despite the restraining order I'd filed after the attack, which technically made her presence illegal, I decided to hear her out. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. You're violating the restraining order by being here, I said by way of greeting. I know, Diana whispered, her voice hoarse. I didn't sleep last night. Lindsay, please don't file those charges. I'll do anything. For the first time in my memory, my sister looked genuinely afraid. Not manipulatively tearful or performatively distressed, truly frightened of the consequences facing her. The agreement is non-negotiable, I stated firmly. All conditions must be met. I'll sign it, she said quickly. I'll do therapy, community service, whatever you want. But the money. Her voice cracked. I can barely make rent. I don't know how I'll ever pay that much. You should have considered that before destroying my car and assaulting me, I replied, unmoved. Financial consequences are part of accountability. Diana's posture crumpled further. I know what I did was terrible. I was just so angry that you wouldn't help me when you could afford it. It felt like you were judging me, looking down on me like you always have. I've never looked down on you, Diana. I've been concerned about your choices and frustrated by your entitlement, but I've always wanted what's best for you. That's why I refused to give you $38,000 for a luxury car you couldn't afford, because it would have reinforced destructive patterns. I see that now, she admitted, tears streaming down her face. I really messed up, worse than ever before. I could have seriously hurt you. I didn't think about that when I threw the coffee. I was just so angry. And then when you didn't respond, didn't press charges immediately, I thought maybe I'd gotten away with it, but it was eating me up inside knowing what I'd done. I studied her, trying to gauge the sincerity of this apparent epiphany. Diana had always been convincingly contrite when cornered, only to revert to old behaviors once the threat passed. Come inside, I finally said. We need to discuss the terms in detail. At my dining table, the same place where I'd presented the evidence to our parents, Diana signed the agreement with shaking hands. Each page seemed to drive home the reality of her situation. When she reached the psychological evaluation requirement, she paused. Do you really think I need therapy? Diana, you committed felony assault and arson because I wouldn't buy you a luxury car. Yes, I think you need therapy. She flinched but continued signing. Later that week, we gathered with our parents for what the agreement termed a family accountability meeting. Diana read her formal apology, acknowledging every action in detail without excuses or qualifications. Her psychological evaluation had been completed, with the therapist recommending twice-weekly sessions to address what she described as narcissistic tendencies and impulse control issues. I'm not saying this to hurt you, the therapist explained to Diana during our group session, but to help you understand patterns that are damaging your relationships and your future. These behaviors didn't develop overnight, and they won't change overnight either. Mom wept quietly as the therapist outlined how their parenting approach had contributed to Diana's sense of entitlement. Dad sat stoically, occasionally nodding in pained recognition. "We thought we were showing love," Mom said defensively. "We never meant to create these problems." "Most parents don't," the therapist acknowledged. "But intention and impact are different things." The good news is that family dynamics can change when everyone commits to healthier patterns. Diana's transformation wasn't instantaneous or without setbacks. 2 months into her therapy, she called me in tears after being denied a loan. "It's not fair. My credit is ruined because of the fraud alert, and I need a new laptop for work." "The fraud alert exists because you attempted identity theft," I reminded her calmly. "And yes, that has consequences." "Have you saved any money toward a laptop?" "How can I save when half my paycheck goes to you for repayment?" she snapped. "It's 30%, not half," I corrected. "And that's considerably more generous than what a court would have ordered." After a pause, Diana sighed. "You're right. I'm sorry for lashing out. Old habits, I guess. My therapist says I need to practice sitting with discomfort instead of expecting immediate solutions from others." That sounds like good advice. A week later, Diana sent me a text message. "Found a refurbished laptop within my budget. Not what I wanted, but it works for now. Small victory." "Definitely a victory," I replied, feeling cautiously optimistic. The community service requirement proved unexpectedly transformative. Diana spent weekends at the burn treatment center, initially resentful but gradually developing genuine empathy for patients. After her required hours were completed, she continued volunteering. "Some of these kids have burns over 80% of their bodies from accidents that happened in seconds," she told me during one of our now monthly coffee meetings with appropriately lukewarm beverages. "It puts my problems in perspective and makes me realize how much worse things could have been if the coffee had hit your eyes." 6 months after the incident, our family gathered for Thanksgiving at Mom's house. The atmosphere was different, more authentic, less performative. Diana arrived on time, bringing a homemade pie and helping with preparations without being asked. When Mom instinctively tried to serve Diana first, Dad gently intervened. "Let's serve Lindsay first today," he suggested. She did most of the cooking. It was a small moment, but it symbolized the gradual recalibration of our family dynamic. After dinner, Diana asked if we could speak privately. In Mom's back garden, bundled against the November chill, she handed me an envelope. "It's not much," she said as I opened it to find a check for $500, above her required monthly payment. "I got a small bonus at work and wanted to put it toward what I owe you. I know it doesn't make up for everything, but I wanted you to know I'm serious about making amends." "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched by the gesture. "That means a lot." "My therapist asked me something that really stuck with me," Diana continued, watching her breath form clouds in the cold air. "She asked when I stopped seeing you as a person with your own needs and started seeing you as just an extension of my needs." I couldn't answer her because I couldn't remember a time when I did see you that way. You were always just there. Reliable Lindsay who had it all together, who didn't need anything from anyone. She met my eyes directly. "I never considered that you worked hard for everything you have, or that you had your own struggles and dreams. I'm sorry it took all this for me to start seeing you as a whole person." It wasn't a perfect ending. Diana still had years of payments ahead. She still occasionally slipped into old patterns when stressed. Our parents still sometimes enabled her in subtle ways. But fundamental change had begun, not just in Diana, but in all of us. As we walked back inside to join the family, I realized that my calculated silence had accomplished what years of arguments and explanations couldn't. By refusing to participate in the established dynamic, I'd created space for a new one to emerge. It wasn't forgiveness that Diana had needed from me, it was boundaries. 6 months stretched into a year, and the transformation in our family continued to unfold in ways both subtle and profound. My burns healed completely, leaving no physical scars, though the emotional aftermath took longer to process. Diana maintained her therapy schedule, gradually reducing to weekly sessions as she developed healthier coping mechanisms. The payment plan remained intact, with Diana occasionally adding extra when possible. While the financial restitution was important, the psychological growth it represented mattered more. Diana learning to fulfill obligations even when inconvenient or difficult. My own healing journey proved more complex than anticipated. Despite Diana's ongoing transformation, I found myself flinching when someone raised their voice unexpectedly or moved too quickly near my face. A therapist of my own helped me work through these trauma responses. What you experienced wasn't just physical assault, Dr. Carter explained during one session. It was a profound betrayal by someone you should have been able to trust implicitly. That kind of wound takes time to heal. One unexpected challenge was navigating well-meaning but misguided comments from people who learned about the incident. You should just forgive and forget, a colleague suggested after Diana attended a work function and someone asked about our matching necklaces, gifts from our grandmother. Family is too important to hold grudges. Forgiveness and accountability aren't mutually exclusive, I replied. I can forgive Diana while still holding her responsible for her actions. That distinction became my mantra. True forgiveness wasn't about pretending the harm never happened or allowing harmful patterns to continue unchecked. It was about releasing the anger and resentment while maintaining healthy boundaries. Diana seemed to understand this nuance better than most. During one of our now regular Sunday brunches, she addressed it directly. My therapist says some people will try to rush your forgiveness because it makes them uncomfortable to acknowledge that someone they know did something terrible, she said, stirring her coffee, which she now always ordered at a comfortable drinking temperature. She says true reconciliation requires the person who caused harm to respect the timeline of the person who was harmed. Your therapist sounds very wise, I replied, touched by her insight. I had a good model for finding the right professional help, Diana smiled, raising her mug in a small toast to me. These moments of genuine connection accumulated gradually, building a relationship foundation based on mutual respect rather than established roles and expectations. Our parents underwent their own reckonings. Mom initially struggled the most, alternating between enabling Diana's occasional backsliding and overcompensating with strict judgment. Dad found his voice more easily, setting clear boundaries while maintaining compassion. During a family therapy session marking the one-year anniversary of the incident, our therapist asked each of us to share the most important lesson we'd learned. Mom went first. I've learned that love isn't about making someone's path easier. Sometimes it's about letting them face challenges so they can develop their own strength. Dad nodded. I've learned that treating children equally doesn't mean treating them identically. Different kids need different types of support, but they all need appropriate boundaries. Diana looked down at her hands before speaking. I've learned that I'm not entitled to anything from anyone, not money, not time, not forgiveness. Everything is a gift, not an obligation. And when people do give those gifts, I should treasure them, not expect more. When my turn came, I thought carefully. I've learned that sometimes the strongest response isn't immediate action or reaction, but strategic patience. And that holding someone accountable can be the greatest act of love if it helps them become their best self. The journey wasn't linear. Diana still had moments of entitlement or self-pity, especially when the monthly payments prevented her from buying something she wanted. I still experienced occasional flashbacks to the attack. Our parents still sometimes fell into old patterns of differential treatment. But the framework had fundamentally changed. Diana found healthier ways to process disappointment. I became more comfortable expressing my needs directly. Our parents recognized and actively worked to correct their enabling behaviors. 18 months after the incident, Diana was promoted at work, her longest continuous employment ever. She called me first with the news. It came with a raise, she said excitedly. I want to increase my monthly payments to you. That's not necessary, I assured her. The current plan is working fine. It's important to me, she insisted. Besides, I calculated that with the raise and a few budget adjustments, I can pay you back completely in 3 years instead of 5. That matters to me, Lindsay. It's not just about the money anymore. It's about showing myself and everyone else that I can follow through on my commitments. That night, reflecting on our conversation, I realized how profoundly our relationship had evolved. Diana was no longer making choices based solely on immediate gratification or the expectations of others. She was developing her own internal compass of values and responsibilities. My approach, the calculated silence followed by clear, non-negotiable boundaries, had worked better than I could have imagined. Not because it punished Diana, but because it created the conditions for her to confront her behavior without deflection or excuse. 2 years after the coffee attack and car fire, Diana completed her community service hours at the burn center, but continued volunteering monthly. These kids have become my friends, she explained. And honestly, it's a powerful reminder of the consequences of losing control. She'd also begun attending financial management workshops and had started a small but growing emergency fund. When her car needed expensive repairs, she handled it herself rather than asking for help, a seemingly small achievement that represented enormous growth. During a quiet moment at a family dinner, Dad pulled me aside. "I want you to know," he said, voice thick with emotion, "that what you did for Diana, standing firm when it would have been easier to either cut her off completely or continue enabling her, was an incredible act of love. Your mother and I should have done something similar years ago. We failed you both in different ways, and I'm sorry for that." "We all did the best we could with what we knew at the time," I told him, surprised by my own serenity on the subject. "What matters is that we're all learning and growing now." The experience changed my other relationships too. I became more direct about my boundaries with friends, colleagues, and even Jason, who had proposed 6 months after the incident. Our marriage was stronger for my newfound clarity about what I would and wouldn't accept in relationships. 3 years after that fateful demand for a luxury car, Diana drove to my house in her sensibly purchased used Subaru, bought with her own saved money after her Civic finally gave out. We sat on my back porch, enjoying the spring weather that once marked the beginning of our most difficult chapter. "Do you remember what you told me when I asked why you didn't immediately press charges?" Diana asked. "You said, sometimes the strongest move isn't the most obvious one." I think about that all the time now in all kinds of situations. It's changed how I approach conflicts at work, with friends, with everyone. I smiled, watching a hummingbird dart among my garden flowers. The funny thing is, I wasn't sure it would work. I just knew that the usual approach, immediate confrontation and punishment, would only reinforce your sense of being victimized by circumstances rather than responsible for them. It was the right call, Diana acknowledged. "If you'd had me arrested immediately, I would have been furious, convinced you were overreacting. I wouldn't have had to face myself." She paused. "Though I'm still glad you didn't actually send me to jail." "That was never the goal," I assured her. "The goal was always for you to become the person I knew you could be underneath all those layers of entitlement." Diana leaned back in her chair, contemplative. "Do you think Mom and Dad feel guilty about how they raised me?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "But I've told them what I'm telling you now. We all did the best we could with what we understood at the time. The important thing isn't dwelling on past mistakes, but learning from them." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the yard, I reflected on how our family had transformed. The entitled sister who once demanded $38,000 for a luxury car now lived within her means and honored her commitments. The enabling parents who once reinforced harmful patterns now maintained loving but firm boundaries. And I had discovered my own capacity for strategic patience and deliberate response rather than immediate reaction. The journey hadn't been easy or quick, and it certainly wasn't complete. Real change never is. But the painful chapter that began with boiling coffee and flames had ultimately forged something stronger and more genuine than what existed before. Sometimes the strongest response to betrayal isn't immediate retaliation, but strategic silence. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for someone isn't giving them what they want, but helping them develop the character to earn it themselves. And sometimes the most difficult people in our lives can transform when finally confronted with the natural consequences of their actions. Have you ever had to stand firm against a family member's unreasonable demands? Did you choose immediate consequences or a more strategic approach? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might be struggling with similar family dynamics. Remember that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's often the most loving thing you can do for both yourself and the other person. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I wish you strength and wisdom in navigating your own challenging relationships. I'm Allison Parker, 28, and I never thought my sister's palm connecting with my face would be the moment that finally set me free. For years, I'd been the family ATM, the reliable one, the responsible sister who couldn't say no. That slap echoed through my apartment, but it was the sound of my mother's laughter afterward that truly broke something inside me. The Hawaii vacation they'd planned, using my credit, became the final chapter in our toxic story. If you've ever wondered when enough is enough with family, my story might give you your answer. Before I dive in, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe if family drama stories like mine resonate with you. I grew up as the middle child in what I thought was a normal American family. My older sister Megan is now 32, and my younger brother Ethan is 24. On the surface, we were the typical suburban family, living in a modest home in Ohio, taking annual camping trips, and celebrating holidays together. That facade cracked when I was 15 and my parents divorced. My father moved across the country for a new job, and over time, his presence in our lives diminished to occasional phone calls and birthday cards. My mother, Rebecca, never quite recovered financially from the divorce. Though she received child support, it wasn't enough to maintain our previous lifestyle. She found work as a receptionist, but refused better opportunities that would require additional training or education. "I'm too old to start over," she'd say, though she was only in her early 40s at the time. I was always the studious one in the family. While Megan was popular and focused on her social life, and Ethan struggled with learning disabilities, I found refuge in academics. My high school counselor encouraged me to apply for scholarships, and I managed to secure enough funding to attend the state university with minimal loans. I worked part-time throughout college, graduated with honors in accounting, and quickly secured a position at a respected firm. My first mistake was telling my family about my starting salary. The day after my graduation celebration, my mother called with tears in her voice. The roof was leaking, and the repair would cost $2,800. I wouldn't ask if I had anyone else to turn to, she said. I transferred the money that afternoon. The small loan was never mentioned again, much less repaid. This established a pattern that would continue for years. 3 months later, Megan needed $1,500 for car repairs. Then my mother's refrigerator died, another $1,200. Ethan needed textbooks and a laptop for community college, $900 more. Each time, the request came with promises of repayment that never materialized. By the time I was 25, I had been promoted twice and had a comfortable salary, but my savings were minimal because of these constant emergencies. When I bought my first condo, I was thrilled to have a place of my own. Within a week, Megan showed up at my door with her oldest child. "Tyler has a work thing, and Mom's busy. I just need you to watch Zoe for the afternoon," she said, already backing toward her car. That afternoon turned into evening, then overnight. Megan didn't return my calls until the following day, when she arrived with fast food and a casual thanks, as if I'd done her a minor favor instead of providing 24 hours of unplanned childcare. As Megan had 2 more children, Lucas and Emma, now 5 and 3, the impromptu babysitting requests increased. I became the default caregiver whenever Megan and her husband Tyler had important plans, which seemed to include everything from actual work commitments to bar hopping with friends. Tyler particularly frustrated me. He bounced between jobs, never staying anywhere longer than 6 months, always with a story about terrible management or unfair expectations. Yet somehow he always had money for his vintage car collection and weekend fishing trips. Meanwhile, Megan worked part-time at a boutique but spent more than she earned on clothing and home decor. My mother enabled all of this. When I expressed frustration about the constant babysitting and financial requests, she would sigh and say, "Your sister has 3 children to take care of. You only have yourself. Family helps family." That phrase, "family helps family," became a weapon used against me whenever I hesitated to provide money or time. The guilt was effective. I'd think about my comfortable condo, my stable job, my freedom, and feel selfish for not wanting to share my resources. Last year, when my grandmother passed away, she left each grandchild a small inheritance of $5,000. Mine went entirely to helping Megan and Tyler catch up on their mortgage after they received foreclosure warnings. They had spent their own inheritances on a lavish anniversary trip to Cancun, assuming they could figure out the mortgage situation later. My portion of the inheritance saved their house, but the only thanks I received was Megan saying, "That's what family is supposed to do." 3 months ago, I received another promotion and a modest raise. I hadn't told anyone in my family, but somehow, Megan found out. Perhaps she overheard me on the phone, or maybe she went through my mail during one of her visits. Whatever the source, the knowledge that I had more income sparked a new wave of requests. My mother's car suddenly needed extensive repairs. Megan and Tyler's roof developed a mysterious leak. Ethan needed help with a security deposit for a new apartment. With each request, the emotional toll grew heavier. I began having anxiety attacks before family gatherings, knowing they would inevitably include requests for money or time. I started working longer hours, partly for the career advancement, but mostly to have a valid excuse to avoid family obligations. "Sorry, I have to work" became my mantra, though it rarely deterred them. "You can take 1 day off," they'd insist, not understanding or caring that my career required dedication and presence. Despite all this, I continued to help when I could. I told myself it was temporary, that eventually everyone would get on their feet. I didn't realize I was enabling a cycle that had no intention of ending on its own. After a particularly grueling week that included a major client presentation and over 60 hours at the office, I dragged myself home on Friday evening, dreaming of a hot bath and an early night. When I opened my door, I found Megan, Tyler, and my mother sitting in my living room. They had used the spare key I'd given my mother for emergencies to let themselves in. "Surprise!" Megan called out, as if their uninvited presence in my home was a gift. I set down my laptop bag and kicked off my heels, too exhausted to even muster proper irritation. "What's going on?" They exchanged excited glances, and Tyler pulled out his phone to show me a series of photos: pristine beaches, luxury resorts, palm trees, and stunning ocean views. "We're going to Hawaii," Megan announced, clapping her hands like a child. 2 full weeks in Maui. "We found this amazing rental property right on the beach." "That's great," I said cautiously, already sensing there was more to this visit than sharing good news. "When are you going?" "Next month," my mother said, beaming. "The first 2 weeks of June. The weather will be perfect." I nodded, calculating how they could possibly afford such a trip. Tyler must have gotten a new job, or perhaps they'd come into some money I didn't know about. "We have a small favor to ask," Megan said, using the phrase that always preceded a not small request. "We need you to watch the kids while we're gone." I blinked, processing this. "All 3 kids?" "For 2 weeks. It's perfect timing," Megan continued, ignoring my stunned expression. "School will be out, so you won't have to worry about drop-offs and pickups. They can just stay here with you." "Here? In my 1-bedroom condo?" I asked, looking around at my compact living space. Well, you could stay at our place, Tyler suggested, as if he was offering a solution rather than creating a bigger imposition. That way they'd have all their stuff. I took a deep breath. I can't take 2 weeks off work, especially not in June. We have quarter-end closings, and I've already committed to covering for a colleague who's getting married. Megan waved this off. You can work from home. Lots of people do it these days. Zoe's old enough to help with the little ones during your calls. She's 7, I pointed out. Going on 17, Megan laughed. She's very mature for her age. My mother jumped in. We've already looked at flights and put deposits on some activities. It's going to be amazing. Something in her phrasing caught my attention. Wait, you've already made bookings? How are you paying for all this? A flash of discomfort crossed Tyler's face before he recovered with a smile. We've been saving up. I would have believed that more if I hadn't just covered their mortgage payment 3 months earlier. Really? That's great, I said, still suspicious. Megan glanced at my mother, then said, well, we did have to get creative with the financing. But the important thing is, we found a way to make it work. What does creative financing mean exactly? I asked, my accountant brain immediately on alert. We just needed a good credit score for the rental property, my mother explained. So we used your address on the application. My stomach dropped. You what? It's not a big deal, Megan insisted. The payments are going through our account. Your address just helped us get approved. That's fraud, I said flatly. Tyler snorted. Don't be so dramatic. People do this kind of thing all the time. A horrible suspicion made me reach for my purse. I dug out my wallet and checked my credit cards. My secondary card, which I kept for emergencies but rarely used, was missing. Looking for this? Megan asked, pulling my credit card from her purse. We borrowed it to book a few activities. The volcanic helicopter tour had a great early bird special, but it was ending today. I snatched the card back, fury building inside me. You stole my credit card? And used my address for a rental application without my knowledge. Borrowed, not stole, Megan corrected. We're going to pay you back. And like Tyler said, the address thing is no big deal. It is a big deal, I exclaimed. It's identity theft and fraud. Oh, please, my mother sighed. Stop being so uptight. This is for a family vacation. A vacation I wasn't invited to, I pointed out. Megan rolled her eyes. Because someone needs to watch the kids. Besides, you don't have kids or a husband, so your time isn't as valuable. You can take time off whenever you want. I stared at her, unable to believe what I was hearing. My time isn't valuable because I'm single and childless? Your sister deserves a break from motherhood, my mother said firmly. It's the hardest job in the world, and she never gets time off. Tyler nodded in agreement. We need this, Allison. We've been under a lot of stress. Besides, it's not like you have anything better to do anyway. They all looked at me expectantly, and I realized with a chill that they had interpreted my shocked silence as agreement. They genuinely believed I would rearrange my entire life, sacrifice my paid time off, and potentially jeopardize my job to provide 2 weeks of childcare so they could enjoy a Hawaiian vacation they couldn't afford. A vacation they had already begun financing through fraudulent use of my information and stolen credit card. I took a moment to collect myself, fighting the urge to scream. Instead, I sat down across from them and spoke as calmly as I could. I understand that you're excited about this trip, but there are several problems here that we need to address. First, I cannot take 2 weeks off work in June. It's simply not possible with my current responsibilities. Megan's smile faltered. But you have vacation time, right? I do, I acknowledged, but I decide when and how to use it. I've already planned my time off for the year, and I need to keep some in reserve for emergencies. This is an emergency, my mother insisted. Family needs you. I shook my head. Watching your children while you take a luxury vacation is not an emergency. It's a request, one that I have every right to decline. Tyler leaned forward, his voice condescending. You can work from home while watching them. Plenty of parents did it during the pandemic. Those parents were watching their own children, not taking on someone else's full-time, I pointed out. And even they will tell you it was nearly impossible to be productive. I can't jeopardize my career for this. Your career, Megan mimicked. It's always about your precious job. Meanwhile, I've put my career on hold to raise 3 children. That was your choice, I said quietly. Just as my career is my choice. My mother gasped as if I'd said something blasphemous. Motherhood isn't a choice, it's a blessing. It's still a choice, I maintained. But that's beside the point. The second issue is that you used my address and potentially my credit information to secure this rental property. That's fraud, and it puts me at financial risk. We'll make all the payments, Tyler insisted. Your credit score just helped us get a better rate. And what happens if you can't make the payments? The collection agencies will come after me, I said. Not to mention that you stole my credit card to book activities. Borrowed, Megan corrected again. God, why are you being such a bitch about this? After everything we've done for you. I blinked in surprise. What exactly have you done for me? This question seemed to throw her momentarily. We're your family. We've always been there for you. Been there for me how? I pressed. By constantly asking for money? By dumping your kids on me without warning? By making me feel guilty for having a successful career? You're so ungrateful, my mother spat. You have a good job and a nice home while your sister struggles with 3 children. The least you could do is help out. I have helped out, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. I've given thousands of dollars that were never repaid. I've provided countless hours of free childcare. I've put my own life on hold repeatedly to bail all of you out of situations of your own making. Tyler stood up, his imposing frame looming over me. So what are you saying? You're too good for your family now. I refused to be intimidated and stood as well. I'm saying that I'm setting a boundary. I will not watch your children for 2 weeks, so you can take a vacation you can't afford. And I expect you to cancel any bookings made with my credit card immediately. Megan's face contorted with rage. You can't do this to us. We've already told the kids about Hawaii. That's not my problem, I said firmly. You should have asked me before making any plans that involved me. Family helps family, my mother repeated, her voice icy. Your sister needs this break. Then you watch the kids, I suggested. Or hire a babysitter with the money you were planning to spend on this vacation. We can't afford a babysitter for 2 weeks. Megan exclaimed, inadvertently admitting they couldn't really afford the vacation either. Then you can't afford a 2-week Hawaiian vacation, I said simply. Tyler took a step toward me, his body language threatening. Listen here, princess. We're not asking anymore. You're doing this because we're family, and that's what family does. I stood my ground, though my heart was racing. No, I'm not. And I'd like you all to leave my home now. After everything we've done for you. Megan shouted. All the times we included you in family events when you'd otherwise be alone. Inviting me to events I often end up financing is not doing me a favor, I pointed out. You think you're so much better than us with your fancy job, Tyler sneered. But we all know you're just a sad, lonely woman who'll die alone because you're too selfish to care about anyone but yourself. His words stung, hitting insecurities I tried to keep buried. But I held firm. I'm not selfish for having boundaries. Now please leave. Family helps family, my mother repeated, as if saying it enough times would change my mind. I have helped, I said, repeatedly. But I won't be taken advantage of anymore. Tyler laughed harshly. Taken advantage of? You've got to be kidding me. Do you know how pathetic your life looks to everyone else? No husband, no kids, nothing but work. We're doing you a favor by letting you be part of our family. That's enough, I said, moving toward the door and opening it. Leave now or I'll call security. Megan wasn't done. You know what your problem is? You're jealous. You're jealous that I have a husband and beautiful children while you go home to an empty apartment every night. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Yes, I'm so jealous of your husband who can't hold down a job and your life that's so wonderful you need to escape from it for 2 weeks. It was a low blow, but I was beyond caring at this point. "You'll regret this," Tyler warned, his voice low and menacing. "We can make things very difficult for you." "Are you threatening me?" I asked incredulously. "He's just saying you might want to reconsider," my mother interjected smoothly. "After all, families should stick together." I held the door wider. "I'm not reconsidering. Please leave now." As they gathered their things, I added, "And I expect that rental booking using my address to be canceled by tomorrow. If I find out you've used my personal information for anything else, I'll report it as identity theft." Megan paused at the door, her face a mask of fury. "You know what? I've always known you were selfish, but I never realized just how cold you really are. I feel sorry for you, Allison. Truly." With those parting words, they finally left. I closed the door behind them, leaning against it as my legs threatened to give way. The confrontation had left me shaking, but for the first time in years, I felt something unexpected breaking through the anxiety and guilt: relief. The relief was short-lived. Less than an hour later, my doorbell rang incessantly, followed by pounding that threatened to crack the wood. When I checked the peephole, I saw Megan, Tyler, and my mother again, their faces contorted with anger. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. "What now?" Megan thrust her phone in my face. On the screen was an email from the vacation rental company: "Booking canceled. Failed credit verification." "What did you do?" she demanded, her voice trembling with rage. "I didn't do anything," I replied honestly. "But it looks like the rental company realized something wasn't right with your application." "You called them, didn't you?" Tyler accused. "You told them we used your address without permission." "I haven't had time to call anyone," I said. "But using my address without my consent was wrong, and you know it." My mother pushed past me into the apartment. "We have to fix this right now. The children are so excited about Hawaii. We can't disappoint them." "That's not my problem," I repeated, growing tired of the entire situation. "You made plans you couldn't afford and tried to involve me without my consent. These are the consequences." Megan followed our mother inside, with Tyler close behind. I felt cornered in my own home, but stood my ground. "You have to call them," Megan insisted. "Tell them it was a misunderstanding and that you approve the use of your address." I shook my head. "No, I won't do that. It would be lying, and it could constitute fraud." "It's only fraud if someone reports it," Tyler scoffed. "Don't be so dramatic." "I'm an accountant," I reminded him. "I understand financial regulations better than you do. What you're asking me to do is illegal." Megan's face flushed with anger. "So what? You're going to let your niece and nephews down because of some stupid technicality?" "I'm not letting anyone down," I said firmly. "You created the situation, not me." "After everything we've done for you," Megan screamed, her voice rising to a pitch that made me wince. "What exactly have you done for me?" I asked again, genuinely curious what they believed they had contributed to my life. "We're your family," my mother shouted, as if that alone was a contribution. "That's not doing something for me," I pointed out. "That's just a relationship status." "We've included you in holidays," Megan sputtered. "We've let you be aunt to my children." "Let me," I repeated incredulously. "You mean when you drop them off without warning and disappear for hours? That's not letting me be an aunt. That's using me as free childcare." "See? This is exactly your problem," my mother said, shaking her head in disgust. "You view spending time with family as a burden rather than a blessing." "I love spending time with my niece and nephews," I clarified. "What I don't love is being taken advantage of, having my boundaries ignored, and being treated like a resource rather than a person." Tyler moved closer, his bulk intimidating in my small living room. "Just make the call to the rental company. Fix this." "No," I said simply. "I won't. U.S." Megan screamed, and before I could react, she slapped me hard across the face. The sound echoed in the sudden silence. My cheek stung, and tears sprang to my eyes from the physical shock. I raised my hand to the burning skin, staring at my sister in disbelief. What happened next was even more stunning. My mother laughed, a sharp, mean laugh that cut through the silence. Maybe that will knock some sense into you. Tyler didn't laugh, but he smirked, leaning down to whisper, "We can make things very difficult for you if you don't cooperate." Very difficult. In that moment, time seemed to slow down. I saw my sister's face, still contorted with rage, but now with a hint of satisfaction at having hurt me. I saw my mother's amusement at my pain. I saw Tyler's threatening posture and the menace in his eyes. And suddenly I saw something else, a pattern that had been present my entire adult life, but that I had refused to acknowledge. This wasn't just family members asking for help. This was financial and emotional abuse. The unauthorized use of my address and credit card wasn't just an overstep, it was identity theft. The slap wasn't just my sister losing her temper, it was assault. As if watching a movie of my own life, memories flashed before me, Megan borrowing money for emergencies that were never repaid, my mother guilting me into paying bills she could have managed if she'd budgeted properly, Tyler's veiled threats whenever I hesitated to help, the constant invasion of my time and space without regard for my needs or feelings. I'd normalized it all because they were family. I'd told myself it was temporary, that someday they would get on their feet and things would be different. But in that crystallizing moment after the slap, I realized the truth. Nothing would ever change unless I changed it. I took a deep, steadying breath and lowered my hand from my cheek. When I spoke, my voice was calm and clear. "I want all of you to leave my home right now. Not until you fix this," Megan demanded, still seething. "You hit me," I stated flatly. "You committed assault in my own home, and you think I'm going to help you now?" "Don't be so dramatic," my mother scoffed. "It was just a slap. Sisters fight all the time." "We're not fighting," I clarified. I set a boundary and Megan responded with physical violence. "That's assault, not a sisterly disagreement." "Are you threatening to call the police on your own sister?" Tyler asked, his voice dangerously low. I met his gaze steadily. "If you don't leave right now, yes. That's exactly what I'll do." "You wouldn't dare," my mother said, but uncertainty had crept into her voice. "Try me," I challenged, pulling out my phone. They exchanged glances, suddenly unsure. "This isn't over," Megan warned as they finally moved toward the door. "You've ruined everything and you'll regret it." I said nothing, just held the door open as they filed out. Tyler paused on his way past me. "We know where you live, where you work," he said quietly. "And we know all your personal information. Think about that before you do something you'll regret." The threat hung in the air between us. I should have been terrified, but instead, I felt oddly calm. "Get out," I said one final time and closed the door firmly behind them. I stood with my back against the door for several minutes, listening to their angry voices fade as they left the building. My cheek still stung and my heart raced, but my mind was surprisingly clear. A decision had crystallized in those moments after the slap, a decision that had been building for years without my conscious awareness. I was done. Completely and irrevocably done. I walked purposefully to my bedroom and pulled my suitcase from the closet. I wasn't sure exactly where I was going yet, but I knew I couldn't stay here tonight. They had a key and Tyler's threats still echoed in my ears. I needed to be somewhere safe while I figured out my next steps. As I methodically folded clothes into the suitcase, I heard my phone buzzing with incoming texts. I glanced at the screen to see Megan's name, but I didn't read the messages. Whatever justifications or accusations she was sending would only cloud my judgment now. I packed only essentials. Enough clothing for a few days, toiletries, my laptop, and chargers. Then I moved on to gathering important documents. I collected my passport, birth certificate, social security card, and financial records, placing them securely in my laptop bag. I added the few pieces of jewelry I had inherited from my grandmother, items of more sentimental than monetary value, but things I couldn't bear to lose if my family decided to retaliate by entering my apartment again. While packing, I heard more knocking at my door, but I ignored it. Through the peephole, I saw my mother standing alone, probably sent back as the reasonable one to convince me to change my mind. I returned to my bedroom and continued preparing. With my essential items gathered, I took a moment to look around my condo. Despite living here for 3 years, there were surprisingly few items I felt attached to. The furniture had been chosen for practicality rather than sentiment. The artwork on the walls had been selected to match the decor rather than to express my personality. Even the books on my shelves were mostly professional references rather than stories I loved. It struck me that I had built a life designed to serve others rather than myself. My home was a convenient place for family to drop in, my career a reliable source of financial support for their emergencies, my time an endless resource they could tap whenever needed. But what did I want? What brought me joy? I realized with a pang that I hardly knew anymore. This revelation only strengthened my resolve. I finished packing, then pulled out my phone and began the process of reclaiming my life, one step at a time. First, I sent a text to my friend Stephanie, family emergency. Need a place to stay for a few days. Can I use your guest room? Her response came quickly, of course. Everything okay? I'll explain when I see you. Thanks, I replied. Next, I opened my banking app and went through each account, canceling every automatic payment I had set up to help my family. The monthly transfer to my mother's account for emergency fund canceled. The automatic payment toward Megan and Tyler's utilities canceled. The recurring deposit to Ethan's tuition fund paused, pending a conversation with him. I moved on to my credit cards, logging into each account to check for unauthorized charges. Sure enough, I found several recent transactions for airlines, tour companies, and restaurants in Hawaii. I called the credit card company immediately. I need to report fraudulent charges and request a new card, I explained to the representative. I'm sorry to hear that, Ms. Parker. Can you identify which charges you believe are fraudulent? I listed the Hawaii-related expenses, explaining that my card had been taken without my permission and used by a family member. Would you like to file a formal dispute and potentially press charges? The representative asked. I hesitated only briefly. Yes, I would. And I need to make sure my card is canceled immediately. After securing my credit cards, I called the 3 major credit bureaus to place a fraud alert on my credit reports. This would make it harder for anyone to open new accounts in my name without additional verification. I have reason to believe my personal information may have been used without my consent, I explained to each bureau representative. I need to protect myself from potential identity theft. With my financial security addressed for the moment, I turned to documenting what had happened. I took photos of my cheek, which now showed a faint red mark from Megan's slap. I wrote down a detailed account of the conversation, the physical assault, and Tyler's threats, dating and signing the document. I then opened my email and composed a message to myself, creating a time-stamped record of events that included all the details I could remember. I attached photos of my face and a list of the fraudulent charges I had discovered. Having this documentation might prove crucial if the situation escalated further. As I worked through these protective measures, my phone continued to buzz with incoming calls and texts. I silenced it without looking at the messages. Whatever crisis my family was experiencing as a result of their canceled vacation plans was not my emergency to solve. Instead, I sent an email to my apartment management company. Due to safety concerns, I need to request an immediate lock change on my unit. My spare key was used without authorization, and I have concerns about unauthorized entry. Additionally, please update your security protocols to not allow entry to anyone claiming to be my family member without my explicit permission. With these immediate protective measures in place, I did one final scan of my apartment, looking for anything else of importance I might need. My gaze fell on a family photo on my bookshelf, the 5 of us at Thanksgiving 2 years ago, smiling as if everything was perfect. I left it behind. I shouldered my bags and walked out without a backward glance. In the elevator down to the parking garage, I felt a curious mixture of emotions: grief for the family relationships I was leaving behind, anxiety about the uncertain future, but predominantly an overwhelming sense of relief. For the first time in years, I was putting myself first. As I loaded my car and pulled out of the garage, my phone buzzed again with an incoming call from my mother. I connected it to my car's Bluetooth system and answered, putting her on speaker. "Allison, thank goodness you picked up. We need to talk about what happened." "There's nothing to discuss," I said calmly, keeping my eyes on the road. "Of course there is. Megan is very sorry for losing her temper. We all said things we didn't mean. Now, about the Hawaii trip." "Goodbye, Mom," I interrupted and ended the call. I blocked her number, then did the same for Megan and Tyler. I would unblock them eventually, once I had established my new boundaries and was emotionally ready to interact with them again, if that day ever came. But for now, I needed space and silence to rebuild my life on my own terms. As I drove toward Stephanie's house, I felt lighter than I had in years. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, it was truly mine to choose. I spent that first night at Stephanie's in a fog of emotional exhaustion, but also strange exhilaration. When I finally told her everything that had happened, her response was validating in a way I hadn't expected. "Allison, I've been worried about your family situation for years," she admitted. "The way they treat you isn't normal or healthy. I'm so proud of you for standing up for yourself." The next morning, I woke to dozens of missed calls and unread messages from unknown numbers, my family using friends' phones to try to reach me after I'd blocked them. I deleted them all without reading them. Instead, I focused on creating a plan for moving forward. My first stop was my bank, where I met with a personal banker to explain the situation. "I need to ensure my accounts are secure," I explained. "Family members have had access to my financial information, and I'm concerned about unauthorized transactions." The banker helped me close my existing accounts and open new ones with enhanced security features. We went through recent transactions to identify any additional suspicious activity. "There's a pattern of large withdrawals to the same accounts over the past few years," he noted, showing me the transaction history. "Were these authorized by you?" I nodded reluctantly. "Yes, those were loans to family members. But I need to make sure no new transactions can occur without my explicit approval." Next, I visited a lawyer who specialized in identity theft and family law. The consultation fee was steep, but worth every penny for the peace of mind it provided. "Based on what you've told me, you have several legal issues to address," the lawyer explained. "The unauthorized use of your address and credit card constitutes identity theft, even when done by family members. The physical assault, while minor in legal terms, is still assault. And the threatening behavior afterward creates a basis for a potential restraining order if needed." "I don't want to press charges," I said, surprising myself with the realization that despite everything, I wasn't ready to see my family face legal consequences. "I just want them to leave me alone while I figure things out." "That's your choice," the lawyer assured me. "But I recommend we send a formal cease and desist letter outlining the legal boundaries they've crossed and the potential consequences if the behavior continues. This creates a paper trail if things escalate." I agreed to this approach, and we drafted the letter together. It was firm but factual, listing the specific incidents of financial abuse, identity theft, physical assault, and threatening behavior, along with the relevant legal statutes they violated. It concluded with a clear statement that any further contact must be through my lawyer until I indicated otherwise. While I was still at the lawyer's office, my phone rang with a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered it. "Allison? It's Ethan." My younger brother was the one family member I hadn't blocked, partly because he hadn't been involved in the Hawaii incident, and partly because our relationship had always been less fraught than my relationships with Megan and our mother. "Ethan, I can't talk about this right now," I said wearily. I know. Megan told me what happened, Her version, anyway. But I wanted to check if you're okay. That wasn't right, what they did. His words caught me off guard. You think they were wrong? Of course they were wrong, he said, sounding surprised that I would question it. Using your credit card without permission? Hitting you? That's messed up, Allison. Really messed up. Tears sprang to my eyes at this unexpected support. Thank you for saying that. Where are you staying? Megan and Mom went to your condo this morning, but the manager wouldn't let them in. They're pretty upset. I'm safe, I said, not willing to share my location. And I'm going to stay away for a while. I need space from all of this. I get it, Ethan said quietly. Just let me know if you need anything, okay? And for what it's worth, I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you sooner. They do the same thing to me, you know. Not as bad, but still. This revelation didn't surprise me entirely. I'd noticed how our mother and Megan tended to manipulate Ethan as well, though in different ways than they did with me. Thank you for calling, I said sincerely. It means a lot. After ending the call with Ethan, I felt marginally better knowing I had at least one family member who understood my position. But the hardest part was still to come. The following day, while at work, I received an urgent message from the front desk. Visitors were insisting on seeing me. I already knew who it was before the receptionist described them. I'm sorry, but I can't see them, I told her. Please ask them to leave or security will need to escort them out. 20 minutes later, my boss called me into his office. Allison, is everything okay? There was an incident in the lobby. My stomach dropped. What happened? A woman claiming to be your sister caused quite a scene. Security had to remove her and a man I assume was her husband. They were shouting about you stealing from them and abandoning your family. I closed my eyes briefly, mortified. I'm so sorry. I'm dealing with a personal situation and they're not handling it well. To my surprise, my boss was understanding. Family issues can be complicated. Do you need some time off to sort things out? I shook my head. Actually, work is the one stable thing in my life right now. I'd rather stay busy. In that case, I've instructed security not to allow them in the building. And if you need to work from home for a few days, that's fine too. His support was another unexpected gift in this difficult time. Thank you. I really appreciate that. The next escalation came in the form of social media. Megan began posting vague, but clearly targeted status updates about ungrateful family members and selfish people who abandon their nieces and nephews. Mutual friends and distant relatives began reaching out, asking what was happening. I decided not to engage with the public drama. Instead, I drafted a single, private message to the few family members and close friends whose opinions mattered to me. Some of you may have heard concerning things about me recently. I'm dealing with a difficult family situation that involves financial boundaries and personal safety. I'm taking some space for my own well-being. I appreciate your understanding and respect for my privacy during this time. Most responses were supportive, though some relatives predictably took Megan's side without hearing my perspective. A few older family members sent messages about the importance of forgiveness and family unity, clearly not understanding the severity of what had occurred. 3 days after I left my condo, I received an alarming call from my credit monitoring service. Someone had attempted to open a loan in my name. The fraud alerts I had placed prevented the application from being processed, but it was a chilling confirmation that Tyler's threats weren't empty. I called my lawyer immediately, who advised documenting this attempt and adding it to our growing file. This strengthens your case if you decide to pursue legal action, she explained. It shows a pattern of deliberate financial abuse. A week into my self-imposed exile, I took a personal day to meet with a real estate agent. I need to sell my condo and find a new place to live, I explained. Preferably in a secure building with good privacy policies. The agent didn't ask for details, just nodded professionally. I understand. Security is increasingly important to many clients. Let me show you some options that might work for your situation. By the end of that day, I had listed my condo for sale and put a deposit on a one-bedroom apartment in a building with 24-hour security, no exception visitor policies, and a management company that took privacy seriously. It was slightly farther from my office, but worth the additional commute for the peace of mind it provided. As I settled into this new chapter of my life, the harassment from my family gradually evolved. The initial fury gave way to guilt-tripping, with my mother leaving tearful voicemails on my work phone, the one number I couldn't change, about how I was tearing the family apart and breaking her heart. Megan's approach shifted from anger to fake reconciliation attempts. "We miss you," she texted from new numbers I hadn't yet blocked. "The kids keep asking where Aunt Allison is. Can't we just talk?" Tyler's messages remained threatening, but became more subtle. "Hope your new place has good security," one text read, making my blood run cold. How did he know I was moving? I forwarded each message to my lawyer without responding. The cease and desist letters had been delivered, and each contact was now documented as a violation of the boundaries we had legally established. 2 weeks after the incident, the credit card company completed their investigation and reversed all the fraudulent charges related to the Hawaii vacation. They also provided documentation that would be useful if I ever decided to pursue criminal charges for credit card fraud. Around the same time, I received an unexpected email from Ethan containing screenshots of conversations between our mother and Megan discussing other financial schemes they had been running using my information. "I found these on Mom's iPad when she asked me to help her with something," Ethan wrote. "I thought you should know. They've been taking out small loans in your name for over a year. I'm so sorry, Allison. I had no idea it was this bad." The screenshots revealed a pattern of systematic financial abuse that went far beyond what I had imagined. Small personal loans, utility accounts, even a cell phone plan, all opened using my information without my knowledge. No wonder my credit score had mysteriously dipped despite my careful financial management. With this new evidence, I finally filed a police report for identity theft. I didn't name names in the report, simply stating that my personal information had been used without my consent to open multiple accounts. This created an official record without immediately triggering a criminal investigation against my family members, a line I still wasn't quite ready to cross. 3 weeks into my new life, I was having dinner with Stephanie when she asked the question I had been avoiding. "Do you think you'll ever reconcile with them?" I set down my fork, considering the question seriously. "I don't know," I admitted. "Right now, I can't imagine a relationship that wouldn't just fall back into the same toxic patterns. They don't see anything wrong with what they did. In their minds, I'm the villain in this story." "And what do you think?" she pressed gently. I think I finally understand that I deserve better," I said slowly. "I deserve relationships that are reciprocal, not exploitative. I deserve to set boundaries without being punished for it. And if my family can't offer that, then maybe we don't have a place in each other's lives right now." It wasn't a final decision about cutting ties forever, but it was an honest assessment of where I stood. For the first time, I was prioritizing my own well-being over family obligations, and despite the pain and upheaval, it felt unquestionably right. 6 months after the slap that changed everything, I stood in my new apartment, looking out over the city as the sun set. The view wasn't as nice as from my old condo, but the sense of security more than made up for it. The building's strict security protocols meant that no one, not even family, could access my home without my explicit permission. It was a physical boundary that reinforced the emotional ones I had been working so hard to establish. My journey of healing had been neither quick nor linear. There were days when the guilt nearly overwhelmed me, when cultural expectations about family loyalty made me question my decisions. There were nights I lay awake wondering if I had overreacted, if I should have tried harder to work things out. But those moments became less frequent as time passed and as I continued my weekly therapy sessions. "What you experienced was financial abuse and emotional manipulation," my therapist had explained during our first session. The fact that it came from family members doesn't make it any less harmful. In fact, it often makes it more damaging because of the trust involved. Through therapy, I began to recognize patterns that had been present my entire life. The way my mother had always favored Megan, making me feel I needed to earn love through achievement and compliance. How Megan had learned to weaponize her role as a mother to manipulate others. How I had internalized the belief that my needs were less important than everyone else's. Boundaries aren't selfish, my therapist reminded me regularly. They're necessary for healthy relationships. People who respect you will respect your boundaries. My financial recovery had been more straightforward, though not without challenges. I had worked with credit bureaus to dispute fraudulent accounts and slowly rebuilt my credit score. I had created a detailed budget that, for the first time, didn't include regular loans to family members. The result was surprising. Within months, I had more savings than I'd accumulated in years of higher earning. I had maintained my no-contact policy with my mother and Megan, though their attempts to reach me had continued for months. The cease and desist letter had eventually stopped Tyler's more threatening messages, especially after my lawyer sent a follow-up warning that included some of the evidence we had gathered. My relationship with Ethan had evolved into something cautiously positive. After several honest conversations, we had established a new dynamic based on mutual respect rather than the dysfunctional patterns of our childhood. I've been enabling them too, he admitted during one of our monthly lunch meetings. But seeing how they treated you and how much better you're doing now made me realize I need to set my own boundaries. He had started therapy as well and had moved out of our mother's house into his own apartment. He was focusing on finishing his degree without the constant drama that had previously derailed his efforts. Mom and Megan still talk about you all the time, he told me during our most recent lunch. They've created this whole narrative where you had some kind of breakdown and abandoned the family for no reason. It's like they've completely rewritten history. I wasn't surprised. That's easier than acknowledging what they did. Do you think you'll ever talk to them again? He asked. I considered the question carefully. Maybe someday if they show genuine change and respect for boundaries. But I'm not holding my breath, and I'm not putting my life on hold waiting for that to happen. My social circle had shifted dramatically over these months. Some friends who had known my family couldn't understand my decision and gradually drifted away. Others revealed themselves to be true supporters, standing by me even when they didn't know all the details. I had also joined a support group for survivors of family financial abuse, discovering that my experience was far from unique. The stories shared in that circle helped me realize that walking away wasn't a failure on my part. Sometimes it was the only healthy option. Professionally, I had continued to thrive. Without the constant drain of family emergencies and unexpected childcare duties, I had more energy and focus for my career. I had taken on challenging projects that previously would have seemed impossible to manage alongside my family obligations. My boss had noticed the change, recently mentioning me as a candidate for a senior position that would open next year. Perhaps most importantly, I had begun to rediscover myself beyond my role as the family problem solver. I had taken up hiking on weekends, joined a book club that actually discussed books rather than gossip, and even started dating again, something that had been nearly impossible with my previous, unpredictable schedule. My latest date had been with Ben, a kind environmental engineer I'd met through the book club. When he asked about my family, I had given a simple, honest answer: we're not close right now. I'm focusing on building healthy relationships. He had nodded without pressing for details. Family can be complicated. Mine too, in different ways. That response, understanding without judgment, felt refreshingly normal after years of explaining and justifying my family's chaotic dynamics. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I turned away from the window and looked around my apartment. Unlike my old place, every item here had been chosen with intention. The artwork reflected my actual tastes rather than what would look appropriate for entertaining. The furniture was arranged for my comfort rather than to accommodate unexpected visitors. Even my schedule was now my own, no more dropped-off children or emergency family meetings disrupting my plans. The pain of losing my family connections hadn't disappeared entirely. There were still holidays and milestones that triggered grief for what could have been. I missed my niece and nephews, though I had sent them birthday gifts through Ethan to maintain some connection without engaging with their parents. But alongside that occasional sadness was something I hadn't experienced in years: peace. The constant anxiety about what crisis would come next had faded. The reflexive guilt whenever I prioritized myself had diminished. The walking on eggshells feeling that had dominated family interactions was gone. I had learned that forgiveness didn't necessarily mean reconciliation. I could forgive my family for their actions, understanding that they were operating from their own wounds and limitations, without putting myself back in a position to be hurt again. That forgiveness was for my benefit, not theirs, allowing me to release the anger and resentment that might otherwise have consumed me. I had also learned that family isn't defined solely by blood. True family consists of people who respect your boundaries, celebrate your successes without jealousy, support you through difficulties without keeping score, and love you without conditions. Some of those people might be biological relatives, but many might not be. Most importantly, I had learned that walking away from toxic relationships, even family ones, wasn't selfish or weak. Sometimes it was the strongest, most self-respecting choice available. The cultural expectation that family ties should be maintained at all costs ignored the reality that some family dynamics were fundamentally unhealthy and resistant to change. As I prepared for bed that night, my phone pinged with a text from Stephanie. Proud of how far you've come this year. Dinner next weekend to celebrate? I smiled and replied affirmatively, grateful for the genuine friendship that had helped sustain me through this challenging transition. The journey hadn't been easy, and it wasn't over. There would likely be more difficult moments ahead, more attempts by my family to pull me back into old patterns, more occasions when I would question my decisions. But I had found a strength I didn't know I possessed, the strength to say no to abuse and yes to my own well-being. That slap across my face had been painful, but it had woken me from years of accepting the unacceptable. Walking away had been terrifying but necessary. And rebuilding my life on my own terms had been the most empowering experience of my adult years. If you're watching this and recognizing similar patterns in your own family relationships, know that you're not alone. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's essential for healthy relationships. You deserve respect, honesty, and kindness, especially from those who claim to love you. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and ultimately for them, is to walk away until real change is possible. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? What helped you through that process? Please like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more stories about finding strength in difficult situations, and share with someone who might need to hear this message today. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, you deserve relationships that build you up, not break you down.